I guess a sense of like what is it like it was supposed to represent wealth or something like that,
Mm,
and then he ends up getting killed by it. I thought that was
mm.
a big moment for me because he like was hugging that rock for a while. Like it was a symbol of hope for him, and he ended up getting killed by it. That was to me a big moment.
It's a very poetic thing. Does anyone else have a big moment like that they want to share? Maybe
Hmm.
I'll share the one that Liz, my girlfriend, told me about, when it was the one that she doesn't generally get afraid of a lot of things, but the one that really got her was the old man creeping up the stairs, and then there's the child just like looking at him, and the child's the only one in the house, and there's this guy right at the stairs. She's like, that put genuine fear into me, and I'm like, yeah, that's a really good shot piece, and just kind of like, it's hard to describe it. Like they're underneath the floor, if that makes sense. Like because he's crawling up from the stairs, like it's you can tell it's like just under the surface, and like they're barely noticing it. It's a good little part.
Yeah, so yeah, I think one interesting thing again, the symbolism all over, and if anyone's interested, you can literally Google like YouTube Parasite visual symbolism, and the shot composition is like all over the map, and it's beautiful. I was just having this discussion the other day with a friend about it. Like, I love Parasite. I think it's a really great film. I actually have the script somewhere. I think it was on my old laptop, which unfortunately the monitor's messed up, so I'll have to track a way of grabbing it. But when I grab it, I'll put it in the group chat because it's a really good read. Like the script of Parasite's outstanding, um, which is impressive too because it was written in English, and that's obviously not the language of the film, but that's how they managed to find producing for it, right? Anyways, but the visual symbolism is one component of it, and you can see it in the text, the way it's described, and then the way it's executed. So it's just a really great film. But even like simple things that I thought were interesting about the script that relate to kind of what Jackie's talking about, like there's all these elements about class and yeah, I mean, there's all these elements about class and karma and justification and all these things that make it so intriguing. But even the basic idea of like the cake shops, right? Everyone know what I'm talking about with the cake shop stuff. Um,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
Renee.
There's kind of just go ahead and explain it.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just making sure people are familiar before I kind of. But then I remember, screw spoilers. It's just the basic idea is that like both of them failed, but the idea, and both of them failed in pursuit of like this short term trend, right? They tried to follow. Um, it's not like one. We have this mythology that's built around the idea that financial success is based on some kind of character element, right? That's
Hmm.
just like that's the great Western capitalist. Oh, here we go. Right, I'm gonna get arrested now, but for being a commie. It's the great Western capitalist myth, right? The idea that if you have the character to succeed, that you will, right? That if you
Hmm.
have like heart and ingenuity and maybe a great idea, then you will be successful financially. And that is a determinant of your value as a human being. Like that's just kind of like the Horatio Alger pull yourself up by your bootstrap myth. And then it's kind of amazing. There's this Korean film that's like, is that true? Um, and so there's the two families operate these cake shops. They follow the exact same trend, which means neither of them has a secret recipe, neither of them has any legacy, neither of them has any kind of one up over the other, and then ultimately both of them fail, but one of them is just able to survive because they're wealthy and were wealthy to begin with, and then the other ends up living in their basement. um, and so I always thought that was just kind of amazing that even on that very simple level, the premise of the movie starts with the very idea that two similar families that were in the pursuit of the same thing were placed in completely disparate scenarios, um, and it's not because one possessed greater character than the other, which I think is right off the bat. The film is letting you know that it's about some deeper themes, and it addresses exactly to what Jackie was talking about. The film makes you empathize with the basement dwellers, right? Which I think
Mhm.
kind of says a lot. That they're the people that the film is saying, hey, don't you identify with them, as opposed to, you know, the comfortable living people, who had the exact same failure, but were just in a position to survive it through no real actions of their own. You just
Mhm.
get the idea that they just have money, you know. So,
But for
anywho,
me, it's like I didn't necessarily empathize with them. I was following their story, but like I did not feel they were really sympathetic characters at any point.
hmm,
Interesting.
okay.
I like that. Is it mostly because of the fact that they seem to be using someone else in this case, or just?
Like it was just I think like to begin with, this opening shot of just their own kind of interactions within the family, and that whole kind of disrespect and disregard that they have in their own house, although they're trying to stick together. I don't know, I just thought they're just very immoral people. So I was interested in where the film was going, but I never watched it before because I was already like I knew what the film was gonna be about, but I had to like sit through it. It wasn't something I was gonna see on my own, I guess.
Okay. Is there anything that I'm curious about that? Was there anything that stopped you from really wanting to kind of see it? Was it just a heavy subject, or is it just?
Oh, I saw like I was in the theaters and I saw the trailer when it became huge, you know.
Mhm.
I guess when it was nominated for all these awards and stuff. But like to me, because I guess I am a foreign film
Right.
place for you
Yeah.
guys, it didn't feel like super, you know, unfamiliar or like um anything new, I guess, to like I guess um I've already seen this kind of dynamic of this representation of poverty versus the super rich.
Mhm.
And so but I did really appreciate in the film how it starts off in the basement and how it starts off just showing you how the like the highest furniture in their house is the toilet,
Mhm.
like that's like their throne, that's like the highest up in their house. Like these kinds of things, these kinds of details are really appreciated. But just in terms of the story and how there's going to be a murder, like all these things you could see in the trailer, I was like, yeah, I don't it just feels a bit like expected, I guess. I don't know. So I wasn't too impressed, but I did like the midpoint a lot. Even though it really confused me, because knowing who these people are and then still having that mother that is very straightforward and very mistrusting of people let in the housekeeper, I thought that's kind of unbelievable for me.
Okay. And midpoint, can you kind of describe that a little bit? We're kind of using these terms, midpoint and
Well,
act
they're
block.
like they're in the house, and this is the point where everything changes in the film. So it's halfway through the film, and it's like they're in the house and they're kind of talking about how this is now their house because these people have now left for their little trip and they're just have become so familiar in these surroundings. And then the woman, the housekeeper, rings the bell, and the mom just lets her in. I was like, that's like I cannot believe that she would actually do that, just based on who her character was up until that point. I don't know. She just felt very mistrusting and very like, okay, this is our turf now. So I don't know. But
Like, yeah,
anyway,
like why let her in?
yeah, why would she ever relinquish that power that she's established? Because she knows that this is the person that could rat them out, right?
Mhm.
So
Oh,
yeah.
that's a fair point. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in. Interesting too. This is a film that I avoided as well. Until like I had enough people I trusted tell me it was brilliant, and then like, oh, I guess I'll plan to get in on it. And then again, in grad school, we had to read it and whatever. It was one of those films where I eventually had to watch it, but I actually personally avoided it simply because I'm not a big fan of the horror genre, and the way it was promoted pushed it that way, and then also just the title Parasite. It just made me
Yeah,
think, oh,
same.
okay,
Same.
I was like, there's a it's a horror film or something, and then just again the trailer. There's a creepy family in the basement. Title's Parasite, and I was like, okay, one family's gonna eat each other or something like that, and blah blah blah. Then you
It's
watch
funny.
it, and
It's
it's
funny. It's funny, but that's what called me towards the movie. I'd heard like some people call it really good, but then I heard it's like, oh, it's Parasite. Like, oh, they live under the house. Like, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait.
yeah.
It's like it's a horror thing. Like, it's gonna get
Yeah, yeah.
crazy.
It's like, oh, the
Korean?
family is
Let's
gonna
get
eat
out of
them
here.
and the parasite. I don't know. I thought, I was fully expecting like a bug horror film or something.
Mm, mm,
But interestingly enough, I just kind of doing research on it too. The filmmaker, who's also interestingly enough the guy who made Snowpiercer.
mhm.
Right.
And
So he makes
what's the
really
other one?
interesting films. But
Okja? Yeah.
he has an interesting thing where he's talked about it where he said the film title Parasite, which the studio and the marketing department actually fought him on because they thought it misrepresented the film. Exactly what happened is what they were afraid of, is that people would assume it was some kind of horror film, right? Some like,
Mhm.
monster thing. Um the marketing department actually fought Bong Hu on the title of the film for a variety of reasons, but he was determined to keep it, and his justification, which I thought was interesting, is that everyone assumes that the basement family is the parasite, but as he was making it, he thought about it the other direction. He was like, the other family is the one that can't wash dishes, they can't
Yeah,
function, they
yeah.
have no ability, they have no actual ability to live in the world without the assistance of other people. So even like as Elvira was referencing, like the housekeepers and stuff. So from his perspective, because he came up with the idea based on when he was a tutor for a wealthy family as a college student, and he felt that he was taken advantage of.
I had
Um,
the same experience, so yeah, I'm just gonna put myself in the same line with the guy that made the film.
yeah, yeah. So he goes, it's really interesting that from his perspective, the parasites are actually the Park family, the wealthy family,
But
and
also the way they come to the people. There's like an explicit line of the wife that says, um, "I I only work on recommendation. Like I only hire people to work for me on recommendation." And I thought that's exactly who these people are.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, So I just say I do find it ultimately fascinating that the title, which kind of pushed me away initially, once you watch it and especially dig into it, it's really compelling because it's the filmmaker's belief that if you ask people who's the parasite of the film, then you can actually learn something about the audience member by who they perceive as the parasite, which I think is kind of interesting. Um, and he said that's why he always found it interesting when the marketing department was fighting him on it, and all the studio executives always thought that the poor family was the parasite, but he never told them that in his entire perspective he always thought it was the Park family. So he finds it really interesting how the film has been perceived in different cultures based on the title. Um, which again I think ties back into Jackie's awesome line of the film contains a ton of universality, right? Or as Jackie put it, even though it was a foreign film, it was relatable. I think that's awesome, right? There's a superhuman component to the film, even though it is told in such a kind of non-traditional narrative way. I mean, it has a lot of like elements to it, that make it not necessarily friendly, right? If you guys, and we can maybe address that too, but if you guys know what I'm talking about, it doesn't hit you over the head with its obviousness, I think. And it's not like a Disney movie where we get clear output at the end about who is good and bad and what behavior is acceptable and which behavior is not, so I think that's kind of what makes it special.
Is it kind of like a symbiotic relationship? They're both kind of dependent on each other in a way.
I mean, I would call it parasitic specifically. I don't know if Austin, you wanted to continue with that.
Oh, no. I mean, I just finished talking. So, I mean, yeah. So symbiotic.
Yeah.
Well,
honestly, I truly believe the Kim family could survive without the Parks.
I think so too. Like, I think in symbiosis there is like a very big need for one another, but like the Kim family, like so the basement people, the Kim family can definitely they have been surviving. This is like their lucky break. But like if this break happened, which spoilers it does, like they do tend to get back on their feet, or at least it's they're not going to die immediately from it. The Park family are just like yeah, they definitely need, like that's a great way to, the perspective of having the Park family actually be the wealthy family, be the parasite, because yeah, they need these people to do the things in their lives because they're busy with like it's just something they don't pay attention to. So
right.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, I guess I'll jump in since I referenced the Disney movie, but this is a really bizarre, I guess, comp. This is comp means comparison, Gloria. Just so you know, this is a really bizarre comp. But it struck me the same is as I was watching Parasite, the Park family remind me a lot of the humans from WALL-E.
That's a good point.
Just
yeah.
like you remember how I don't know if you guys saw the picture. They're so bloated, they're almost functionally useless. And of course, also in WALL-E, they had destroyed Earth in general. That's why they were in space to begin with. So obviously, humans are parasitic in that film. So as bizarre as it sounds, I was like watching it this time around, the rewatch, and I was like, I really never noticed that Parasite and WALL-E are kind of like addressing the same things. Just one's a friendly robot, and the other's whatever human family. Oddly enough, neither of them really use. Both of them make their point without using the English language. So, way to go, both films. So,
I did want to highlight one thing that Ken said. I don't know, Ken, if you want to talk about it, like you let the message on here.
Oh yeah, kind of talking about the characters because like what Elvira was talking about with how she didn't feel that she could emphasize on them. So it was interesting because I think the characters are just supposed to be shown a full range of emotion. Like it's not black and white. You're not supposed to. I think oftentimes when there's stories about marginalized people, sometimes they have to be written as entirely good to be empathetic to an audience. But I like about Parasite that they're shown as just human beings. Like they have inner fighting, they have maybe selfish motivations at times. But I think that it shows the full range of like the human experience for someone who's poor and someone who's never had much, and it shows them realistically. And for me, it made me empathize with them more because I can relate to some of their struggle. And so that's what I was saying. It's not really black and white. The rich family is in black and white. Neither are the poor family. They're not written as entirely good or bad. And I think that's one of the great things about this film.
I think that's what helps make it like a different movie than so many of like, because I think it's easy to make a class type movie. Not easy, right? Yeah, writing it's not as easy as we all think it is, but I think hitting those elements of just like Austin was saying, finding those characters that are villains, like you can just definitively say that's a villain, like that's the bad guy, right? Which in certain movies is really good, but I think to your point, Ken, yeah, like the complexity of the Park family. Let me see. No, the complexity of the Kim family. Sorry, the basement dwellers, the basement people. Is the best way to describe. Um, does show that like while there may be some sympathy there, like if you can find it, that they're not necessarily like angels. Angels with like some dirt rubbed on them. Like they have their own problems and their own uh, things going on. Uh, one of the next things I wanted to get into, Jackie, as well, is so we talked about why you chose the movie and what scenes kind of spoke out to you, but um, we talked about the deception a little bit earlier. But how does this writer use the deception in the story? And do you think it's super effective? Do you think it's not? What's your ideas on that?
Like as far as deception, you mean like the twist at the end, or
Maybe not the twist, but like would like I think a big part of this film and like a lot of what the characters use is sort of like what you could call their like weapon in the film, like how they attack, is that they find a way to like lie and like not, I should say more specifically like the Kim family finds a way to like again, my favorite scene again is the scene where he puts the ketchup on the or the hot sauce whatever on the napkin, and it shows it's like, oh man, she's bleeding, she's dying, and then convinces the rich family to kick out the old housekeeper. So there's a lot of things like that where um, they'll just end up deceiving one family, or like the old housekeeper will do the same to them, um, like with the phone, like where they're recording and everything like that to have evidence and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a huge like point. Like in a war movie, you have guns and you have big guns and you have at the end a bigger gun kind of deal, right? Um, and this is sort of like the weapon or like the actions that these characters take in order to get what they want. Um, do you feel somewhat the same way, or how do you feel about that? Do you feel
well, I guess that's what I thought was really creative is that the son, I feel like he was kind of like he's the reason why he involved his whole family. Like especially that scene where he's coaching the dad on like what to say, and the dad was all getting into it. He's like, no, 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 take it down a notch. Like he's coaching, like I think he's the reason um like he's the reason why they all decided to join in because um I feel like they are a tight family, like they seem to do everything together, and so he just wants his family to um get better, like to be out of their financial situation.
That's a good point. Like, yeah, so the son is essentially the one that starts it, and then through their love, through the power of love, they get their way into they one by one get their way into having the whole Kim family into the Park family house.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's a good point because you're right. Like, what they are like as angry as they, or like just with the dynamic that they have. Yeah, you can see the family doing a bunch of different things. Like I remember the pizza box scene is always kind of like one of those like interesting visuals for me because it's like that's like not the most common thing you see in a movie, but yeah, like everyone's doing like they have a system for it. Um, and do you think this will kind of go into our next question, but I don't want to get there just yet. But do you think that because I like to talk about the ending because someone pointed out to me that if you like, the song is in Korean, like if you listen to the lyrics, it's supposed to sort of what's up? Oh. But if you listen to the song, like, but the song, the lyrics, like, it sort of, what's the word? It invites I don't know. There's a better word for this, and I'm going to talk around it. But it invites the idea that like the kid talks about like I'm gonna get rich and I'm gonna get fame, like I'm gonna get rich and I'm gonna get smart and I'm gonna get you out of there, Dad. Don't you worry. But the lyrics say like, oh, that's not gonna be true. Like that's not gonna happen. And so this like the ending is sort of is like not lying to us, but is giving us that sort of complexity that the rest of the movie has been giving us. And my thing is that like I guess I don't really have a question for this, but it's just like I feel like that's one of the biggest deceptions is that they're going after the audience. Because I think it's hard to. One thing I've been like looking into a bit more is like how to lie in a script, like how to know when a character is lying when we haven't seen them lie before, and you have to sort of like invite, like in sort of just sort of how do you start that? And a lot of it is just showing and telling, like is showing like what the characters are doing, and then have them lie about that, even though we saw it. I think we have a little bit of that in uh, Eternal Sunshine, but that's a conversation. That's a whole bag in and of itself. And so I think for me the ending also is like a really big like a deception point because it's at this whole point we've been seeing these two families kind of go back and forth, including the basement dwellers and everything like that. Leads to a head with the murder, and then the ending is telling us like, okay, cool. Well, this kid got us in this situation. He's going to get his father out of the situation that he put him into. But the song is telling us otherwise, and it's this interesting like we've deceived all the like we've run out. We've done what we can with the characters. Now it's time to like mess with the audience, sort of deal. That's just one big thing I liked about the movie because that ending is sort of like because I remember watching the ending. I was like, oh, cool! It's kind of an uplifting kind of ending. He's gonna get his dad out of there. And then my friend was looking it up. Like we all watched it the same night, and my friend looked it up, and he's like, yeah, man, that's not what the lyrics are saying. I'm like, what? So, yeah, it was a wild. It's a wild like coming to find that out.
But also, like for any parent, I would think the aspiration is for your kids to do better than you, and here the son gets killed. So
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Go
just
ahead,
saying,
Austin.
that's a good point.
Yeah. But does anyone else have anything on that? Like, did they like the way the deception was used? Did they not?
I did. I liked the way deception was used throughout the film. I think it kept me on my toes a lot because I was like, I was just waiting for this everything for shit to hit the fan so hard, and the ending, like the scene at the party when the murder occurs. I'm like, what? So that threw me for a loop. And like you said, toward the ending where it's like, oh my god, it's a nice ending. They're running off to the sunset, and it's nope. Nope, like it crushed my hopes. Like, wow. I think that's the point of the director is to say like, yeah, these situations, this sort of oppression that this families is experiencing is not easy. It's not, it's not an easy way out of poverty. It's kind of a continuous cycle where you can get stuck in, literally.
I was going to piggyback on that because yeah, you're right. Like you're kind of following it the whole time and getting the twist and turns. Austin like this reference, and it's something I think is interesting. There's that movie Glengarry Glen Ross, and there's one of my favorite lines forever, or like just one of the concepts that they bring in is that like you never say anything until you know the shot. And so the idea is just you don't open your mouth until in the movie, like the idea is that you don't talk to anyone or say anything unless you know like what the lie is. Yeah, the shot. So what the lie is and how the story is going, because their whole thing is that they're creating story. So I think in this case it's not one to one, but I think the idea of just like having like the son teach like all the different family members like, okay, here's what we're doing, here's the plan, here's what I got, and then it all sort of like falls apart like at the midpoint, like Elvira was talking about with the older lady coming in and kind of being like, oh, I'm the old housekeeper, I forgot something in the basement. You're like, what? And then like there's a basement, and then and then, well, I agree with you, Elvira. Like, it is kind of weird that like she just lets her in, but I think there's a let me see. Sorry, real quick, I'll finish this and I'll let you talk about this. We just got a comment. But I just think it's interesting that yeah, like once that happens, it throws the whole plan out of whack, and now it's like, well, what do we do? How do we continue this? I don't know. This isn't part of the plan, and you start to see the cracks and like everything kind of going through. But go ahead, Elvira. You posted something.
Oh, that's all I was gonna say. It's like what Ken was talking about. I was like, this just reminds me of this Bosnian saying, and I guess that is kind of what the film circles back to. That it's like even this hopeful endeavor that they've been engaged in this whole while, in the end, didn't work out for them because they. In a way, it worked out, but then also didn't because somebody, got really hurt.
Yeah, I yeah, I'm with, and I also want to just address one small detail because the film is so loaded with symbolism. I end up kind of looking for value in everything. You're like, oh, what does that mean? To the point where, so like even at the end, I don't know why it's like it made me legit laugh out loud when the house that they wanted, so that the house he's writing the letter and they're going to purchase, the house that he wants so desperately is like occupied by a German family, and I was like, of course it has to be a German family. Even in a Korean movie, it's always got to be like the Germans. This is
Same,
like the
same.
ultimate villain in cinema history. It's like, we need bad guys, German family. And I was just
Yeah,
like, part of me was like kind of legit laughing at the end. It was like, that can't be an accident. And
it's
I
like
thought that was
it's like
kind of funny.
like the whole movie's about class system, and that's the enemy. It's the class system and all this stuff. But if we need a bigger enemy, look at the Germans.
Yeah,
But
it's the
also, I
Germans.
think maybe Germans in this regard symbolize the expat Europeans, that the whole Asian, especially like I know so many people that have been to Singapore or that have been expats in the Emirates, like it's like a thing to go to Asia as a European person and then make a career there and earn a whole bunch of money and just be only in these top level positions and earn so much that they can afford such a lifestyle.
Sorry, there's a comment I saw. No, I 100% agree with you. Like, that's a good point. I was sort of thinking that. I wasn't sure if I was like also wondering, but you kind of put it right into place. Yeah, like I don't know personally a lot of people, but like, all your richer friends. Like I have a bunch of friends on Facebook, whatever, from high school, and I'm seeing them like travel all the time and like live in these places and only kind of live in these higher echelons,
Mm.
and it's kind of weird. Like yeah, like you said, just like an expat. It's just that like okay, like what this story was about, like a Korean families. Like this was a entirely Korean film, and then um now like the Germans are coming in. It's like okay, like there's a sort of disconnect there with cultures, and so like now we've got to figure this out. But I think that's what makes the ending a bit. Um, does anyone have any other points before I
But
get to
also,
the?
like for
Okay.
me, how the film starts with them like looking through the basement house that they live in for the Wi-Fi, and I think that's just this idea of online. This is the life we're supposed to aspire to, and this is also the
Oh
life
yeah.
they aspire to. So they don't even have legit Wi-Fi. They cannot pay their bills. And then there's this virtual world that they kind of get a peek into and they just like take over just to find that there's so many others who are also vying for that same life. And that like on a very intimate level they have to then fight with to then in the end not get it.
Mhm. I think that's a good point too. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Cassius.
Oh,
Go
okay. No, I was just gonna say, like, I think it's a good point too, because yeah, it's like I think one of the things, especially like, I think it's hard to also put phones in scripts sometimes. I think having a cell phone kind of deflates a lot of that like tension for like horror movies, but I think this one used technology really well. But no, you're right. Like with the idea that like they want to go into something better, and so like it just creates that image in their brain, and that's something that they want to go after because it seems as successful. But yeah, go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, and I also think it's an interesting point that Elvira particularly brought up too, because yeah, they're looking for Wi-Fi, and we're like, oh, they're basement dwelling, but they need, but it's an interesting component to me at least, where they need it almost as a form of necessity at this point. They use it for their survival. You know what I mean? To operate. It sounds as weird as it is. Like they're these basement dwelling folk, but even they need the internet in order to just operate in modern society, right?
Yeah.
Even in their quote parasitic nature, right? It's like we're so plugged in because they have to use it in order to create their identities and pursue work and all that. So, it's part of their daily existence
Mhm.
just as much as quote successful wealthy people's, right? They need it just as badly, which I think is kind of fascinating.
I
Yeah,
did like that Photoshop scene.
even though their lives are very much hands-on, right? Like when you first see them, it's like the socks are hanging, there's like the piece is getting folded. There's always like some kind of a tactile component to them, and very like hands-on. But even for that, they indeed need the Wi-Fi, and they need to like, yeah.
I just wanted to get to the point that Ken was talking about, but like another interesting point is that Bong Joon-ho grew up wealthier, but many of his films are commentary on wealth disparity. Yeah, it's true with Snowpiercer, and I still really want to see The Host. I hope The Monster is the wealth disparity.
Also, Memories of Murder. That's one of his earlier films. Some people haven't watched. That's really, really good as well.
Cool.
I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, and then there's Okja with the aren't they killing those like hippo looking things? Isn't that the main thing? Is that the kid's trying to save this one?
Yeah, I think so. In
Okay.
Okja.
Yeah,
I feel like
Okja had a really good run. Just for anyone who's interested, had a really pivotal role in an episode of Poker Face this season.
really.
Yeah, it's a huge. There's an episode of Poker Face where the entire plot hinges on a character watching Okja. It was made me laugh. It was brutally funny. It was a really really funny moment actually, because whatever spoiler. The guy is a famous Southern barbecue cook, right? So he makes sausages and da 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 da. Essentially, what happens, and then the next day he tells his brother, played by Little Reb Howery, that he's leaving the barbecue business, and he's seen the error of his ways, and he's become a vegan. And then it turns out that the protagonist of the series got bored and showed him Okja the night before, and so it completely changed his life and set the entire plot of the episode. It's pretty funny if you guys get a chance to see it. It's like
That's pretty
episode
great.
3. So
Yeah. And then a last point I just wanted to get into, and this will be both for this one and Eternal Sunshine. I just think that these endings are so, like, man, both these movies are so heavy, but like their endings always usually end up being just as heavy. But like, do you think this ambiguous ending was satisfying? Did you not? Do you think it should be satisfying in a movie like this?
I
Go
I
ahead.
guess for me, it just kind of feels like the ending was stating that just because of just their wealth status, like they will always be poor, like they will never get there. That's what it felt like. And even in one of the scenes where like the little boy was saying that they all smell alike, it was kind of just saying that they're always gonna be different. Like they will never that was I guess like their difference like like they'll always be poor. They'll never get to their status. That's what it's called.
I'm curious then, because I'm kind of going on a more visceral level because I have a bigger point to make. But did you find it satisfying, like with that ending, where you like did you kind of get that like sense of closure or that sense of just
I didn't find it satisfying. No, not me. I don't know, just something about the ending was kind of like sad, yes.
Interesting. Can I jump in? I'm
yeah,
I'm
go for it.
fascinated why you picked a film that you didn't find the ending satisfying. That's interesting. Because so wait, I'm intrigued by, were you dissatisfied with it because you think it didn't work, or the sadness bothered you, or I guess the question I'm asking, was it an effective ending for you or
It
a
was
non-effective ending?
it was effective ending. It was just like I guess I wanted to see
That's not what you hoped for.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. I see.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah,
I think that's interesting because I think that's a fair discussion because that's even in our, like I said, the little module one, whatever. The ending must be satisfying. We talk about it all the time. It may not be the ending you want, but when you talk about in terms of satisfying is like, does it function? And I know I
Oh,
reference it all the time, but I will always go back to No Country for Old Men because there were just people screaming at the screen at the end of that film. Like I saw it multiple times in the theater, and every time there was always people just yelling like, "What the fuck?" or "God damn it!" or like, like just furious at the ending of that movie. And I like the first time I was kind of shocked by the ending too, and then after that it just became hysterical because I knew it was coming. I was like, haha, watch how these people get mad. And it was very satisfying in that regard. But the more, after I got over the initial ending of that film, I was like, that had to be the ending. That's the point of the movie. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
if you changed that ending, I wonder if that's the case you feel for this film, right? Yeah, Elvira, you were gonna say something? Sorry.
Not just agreeing with you.
Mm.
I wanted to make a point. I think a lot with these films like No Country for Old Men or Parasite, I think these films try to capture just a moment in human life rather than, like an adventure or like several months or whatever the case may be. I think they try to capture the human experience in this moment. And, we live in a world, we see bad things happen to people, and that's just the state of affairs. And I think these filmmakers understand that, and that's why these endings are the way they are. Like, yeah, not everything has a good ending because that's just reality that we exist in.
Mm.
I think I bring up the question mostly because I like this discussion. I want to continue it, but I bring up this mostly because I think one thing that's important to always think about when you're writing, and these are for any, I guess, at any skill level, is just like um, is the audience interaction. Like sometimes you can make movies for yourself, but I think ultimately like you have an audience that you're going to, and I think having like an ending that uh, is effective is more important than necessarily like the visceral satisfaction, like Austin was saying. Um, I did not understand the No Country for Old Men ending when I first saw it. I was kind of like, well, I guess it just ended. One movie. I'm a college film buff. That's one more movie down, and then later I realized what the movie was about. But because I like one thing I just real quick on talking about endings and things like that. Like there's a lot of good endings, there are a lot of bad endings. Some people like it either makes the movie for them or it breaks the movie for them, or they can live without it. I think one of my favorite type of endings, if you ever just need to see how to get in and out of an ending, like of a movie, I would recommend just watching old Shaw Brothers, Shaw Scope kung fu films. Like those movies will literally like they'll have their big fight and like there's almost no resolution. It's like big fight is done, bad guy has this one regretful line, dies, credits, let's go, let's get out of here. We got to get out of here by 10 or else, for the next crew to come in. But those endings end quick and it's like they're not necessarily satisfying as like super effective. Like the story is done, so there's no need to linger on. Um, but it's a different ending than, let's say, like a No Country or something. I'm gonna be pretentious here and just call it a more artistic film. Um, like I think Ken, you're absolutely right. Like Ken, I think you're absolutely right about like it's more of like a reflection. Like these people are like the filmmakers and these writers are seeing the world and just reflecting what they see in a way that and I think that's what writers do in general is that they reflect what they've seen and their experiences to sort of get to get a point across of like maybe an injustice or maybe a beauty they see or just whatever thing they're trying to like see, whatever thing they're trying to communicate. But I think forever and ever, like when you talk to like a writer who isn't like finished writing, you kind of see the idea go on and go on, and then they don't really have an ending just yet. And then when they go to sit down and write that ending, it ends, or like they sit down and write the story, like the path isn't clear because the ending isn't there. And so I think a lot of like, um, I think one thing a lot of writers can just get out of is just understanding what your ending looks like and how it pertains to your beginning, and then going through it and then being able to connect those two. Writers are different. You end when you end. George Martin is someone we all know who tends to, you know, continue going on. But um, I just think it's important to think about effective endings like this. Again, I talked about it with me and my friend, and like, you know, like it seems all happy and joyous, and it's like, but then you're like, oh man, this is sort of a downer ending. Like I don't feel, you know, I don't feel like I can take on the world. I don't feel like I should, you know, go out and become a corporate person from this. Like I don't feel that sense of like I can't wait to go out tomorrow, like to wake up tomorrow and see beauty in the world. Like the sun's gonna shine just a little bit brighter tomorrow. Um, yeah, like this is a movie that you kind of wake up the next day and you're like, man, I got to go to work. Uh, um, but go ahead, Austin. You're sending some comments, and I wanted to let you go ahead. Oh yeah,
Oh
Wayne's
no,
World.
no, no! I
Don't
was
you
just
gotta
trying.
say
Yeah,
you
yeah.
gotta say
One
the
was
Wayne's
just a
World one.
Wayne's World reference because
The Wayne's
whatever.
World's my favorite though. Like with
Yeah,
the
yeah. Since that film had like 4 different endings, just pick the one you like. You know,
yeah.
whatever. Um, that made me laugh as a child. But also, yeah, just Ken's thought process, Ken's comment got me thinking about that, about commentary, and it's true because immediately after No Country, you're just like, wow, what was that film really about? You know, it can't just be about a bold cut psychopath. It has to be about something deeper. Um, you know, and same thing with Parasite. You're like, okay, it has to be about something deeper. And I was just kind of thinking about that in the last few minutes as a result of that commentary. And I was like, maybe that's it. Maybe, you know, these ambiguous endings, because we don't get again, it almost sounds sexual, but because we don't get an air of completion, it feels like because the film journey doesn't complete, it's like the audience is left to fill in blanks, and that's where we start thinking in terms of commentary. So even like it seems weird, but I know we've referenced it before, but even films like The Graduate, which seems like a complete journey, but Mike Nichols at the end, he has them look back, you know, after they flee the wedding in the back of the bus, and then they look forward and they have that very ambiguous look on the face of like, where do we go from here? Right? Which I thought was a really, really interesting thing where it's like their journey is complete, but Mike Nichols, kind of being a genius, ends the film on this moment where they're unsure and their happily ever after might not be happy and ever after. So I know it sounds weird, but he takes like the last 10 seconds of that movie and makes it feel like they're starting a new one, but we just ran out of time, you know, which I think is a really interesting component. So, oh, Jeremy, I saw your response to The Graduate. He was like, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I personally tend to gravitate towards them because I don't know. I get a sense of like me personally, like deeper satisfaction. That's coming back to that term. Deeper satisfaction when I walk away from a film like, man, that was about something, as opposed to I'm really glad Stifler ended up with that girl, you know,
Yeah.
whatever, you know, yeah, yeah. I'm happy
Um,
the man child matured and started his family and took over the family restaurant. But I get it, but
mhm.
I just kind of prefer things that explore a little deeper than that. The American Pie movies don't quite do it for me. You know,
Are you sure? We got to
I'm
rewatch those,
yeah,
homie.
I'm
They
good. I
were
can only
like,
watch a guy fuck a pie so many times where I'm like, oh, this is genius.
what if I told you an early draft was written by one Sam Shepard? Hmm?
I'd watch that
Playwright,
film.
playwright extraordinaire to the stars.
That's
No,
funny. He would write a play called American Pie, but it'd be a lot different than the ones we saw.
have
Anywho,
coyotes in it. Anyway, yeah. Um, no, I'm glad you brought that up because um, I think it's just depending on where you're coming at with your films is that how you have your endings, and I think like I know we have a disconnect about like Star Wars, but I enjoy like I think my favorite ending of those movies is just Empire Strikes Back, just because we have that sense of like, man, well the story's over, everyone's kind of like licking their wounds and everything's going, but there's a hope for the future kind of deal. Like there's a whole it's almost because it's always like sequel bait, and I kind of don't like that all the time. Like there are certain movies like Back to the Future is one, the first movie like ends and then there's like a sequel bait for it. Um, but I think depending on the genre, like if you get a movie like No Country for Old Men or um, Big Lebowski, or like a lot of Coen Brothers movies, just like to have their like ambiguous endings, nothing that just feels sort of like and done, sort of like play over kind of movies. Like yeah, it just really depends on the genre, and I think something like I'm only bringing this up because I just want to explain that like I've read some scripts, and I'm sure Austin you've read a million more scripts of just people trying to blend in these like artistic endings and these ambiguous endings that aren't justified when it's like, let's say, an action movie and maybe the genres aren't necessarily like gelling right, but it's that the person wanted Predator but then wanted like Parasite ending kind of deal, if that makes sense.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's
I think
interesting because I can provide it for you. I think I may have shared it with you guys at one point, but I can't remember. Let me know if you guys want it again. That PDF of The Woman,
yeah.
the action screenplay that I can't believe I forgot her name. The woman who created Lovecraft Country, right? And I remember when we first started the group, and I was telling you guys about how I read the screenplay, and it's interesting and it's super action filled and it's awesome because it's whatever uh, unnamed black female action protagonist, and then a few months later it's like, and Jennifer Lopez got the part, which I think is like super funny that they just recast that entire film. But anyways, yeah, it's an interesting thing because one of the big bugs for me, I don't know if any of you read The Woman when I sent it to you, or The Mother. It's The Mother. It's called The Mother. Sorry. Um, when I sent it to you, but the one big thing that really bothered me was the ending because it tried to leave it on this ambiguous ending, which also sets up a sequel, and I just found it like really kind of lame, Um,
Would you say disingenuous to the script?
yeah, I wouldn't honestly, I wouldn't say disingenuous to the script so much as it was like such a gimmick.
Mm.
So gimmicky that I was like, oh, again, whatever. I don't think. I shared it with the group, and the last scene in the script, as written, is the mother is watching her daughter play in a park, and then she turns and looks directly at the camera, and then the camera pulls back, and our perspective, the audience perspective, is now a sniper scope with the crosshairs on the mother's forehead, and then it cuts to black. And I was like, oh, come
No
on,
gunshot?
yeah. I was like, whatever. Yeah, it is a cool shot, I guess, but it's clearly like sequel
Yeah.
2 or whatever, sequel
Yeah.
upcoming type stuff. It's like,
The second mother.
yeah. So,
Uh,
okay,
no, I
no
get you.
worries, Ken.
Thank you for the input. Yeah, really.
You're welcome. I'll see you guys next week.
Next
Okay.
week for
See you. See
sure.
you.
Cool. Any last things on Parasite?
Anyone else half expect like a monster to come? I think we talked about it earlier, like a monster to come out of the basement, and then it'd be like, "This is the parasite."
Or I always thought it would be more like little bugs crawling underneath the skin of the basement people.
Oh,
You
like
know?
in Mummy.
Yeah, I don't know. Like there's that, like there's always those body horror films where there's like little tiny
Mm,
parasites that are like, and you
yeah,
can see people's skin, and it looks like they're bubbling or gurgling, and it's because there's like
yeah.
little bugs. I don't know. I thought it was. I legit thought that's what I was going to be watching. But yep.
But Jackie, since you're presenting it, do you have anything else you want to leave off? Like now watching the, I guess I don't know if you'd seen it before, but like now watching it and like thinking about it and having this discussion, is there anything you're like retrospectively kind of like, oh, okay, about, or like just learning about?
I guess like for me, like with my what I'm working in as far as my script, I want my characters to be uh just as skillful and like that and use also symbolism because the I think the film is also like just like social satire that I'm trying to also bring into my script. So I'm kind of um I guess getting ideas as to what I could do to improve like maybe like my writing and my character development. When I first saw the film, I didn't even see like the trailer or anything. I thought it was going to be about zombies. So when I went into it, I was like kind of shocked at what I was seeing. But I thought it's one of my favorite movies. Um, so I just thought it was such a great film.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for choosing this movie, and thank you for helping us present. And yeah,
Yeah.
yay.
Um. Cool. And right on an hour. So we want to take a 5 minute.
Let's do that, and then Elvira, we're all set for you.
Okay.
Cool.
All
See
right.
you all in 5. Do, 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 do. Alrighty.
I know it's been a while, but is everyone back?
Yeah,
I know
we should
Nicole.
go. It's been a full 10.
Oh no. Okay. For our next presentation, Elvira, you chose Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, written by one of my favorite writers, Charlie Kaufman, Michelle Gondry directing. And yeah, if you want to introduce the film and then tell us why you chose it and then what moments spoke out to you.
I watched this film when it first came out, and then I haven't seen it since. So I just chose it because I wanted to rewatch it and kind of analyze it, because I remember it made such a big impression on me. And I think for me, it was the first time I had seen in a Hollywood picture with really famous artists this type of play, I guess, where I very vividly remember this scene when the guy reverted back into a baby, and then everything was big and made like in huge scale. And I just remember being really impressed that there's this artsy film with like really famous actors in it. So yeah, and then now rewatching it, I don't know, 25 years later or
19.
something.
Today is actually the
19.
19-year anniversary of its release. How serendipitous.
Yeah,
It's
right?
exactly 19
It's
years
like,
today the film came out. Wild.
and also I watched Kate Winslet's interview recently, like a few months back, where she had said that it would be interesting for her as an actress to revisit that character 20 years later.
Mm.
So I thought, that would maybe also be a good reason to rewatch it. And so I wasn't as impressed. And maybe also because now I analyze films, I don't just live in them.
That's a good way to
So
put it,
maybe I
honestly.
should have this group to blame for that,
Right.
spoiling films for me.
Welcome to hell.
What I really like, an interesting moment, I don't know, I really liked the detective aspect of the film,
Mm.
that it kind of reminded me of that film Memento, that just the opening then kind of makes you is the pull that then drives you through the film to want to find out what the hell happened. And I also really loved how her hair color changes with her moods. I like that visual aspect.
I will say, right off the bat, I love Charlie Kaufman. I have a couple of his scripts. I think he's one of my favorite writers ever. I've seen Synecdoche, I've seen Adaptation, I've seen a couple of his other films, Anomalisa. They're really good. I really like them. I think in his script, he's very clear about even his more
complex,
absurd. Yeah, his complex. Like there are a lot of scenes in there. Like when you try to describe to someone, it's hard to describe. But like the complexity of a scene when like he goes from one place to another, it's really interesting, and I think he does really well. I didn't like this movie. I never saw it.
I'm not a fan either.
I didn't see it. Yeah. I'm gonna absolutely. I think the production is fantastic. I think everyone does a really good job. I'm not the biggest fan of a withheld Jim Carrey, but like the script, I think, is what held a lot of it down for me. And I'm really upset because it's like the one movie I had actually never seen this movie before. And it's the one movie that everyone talks about, like, oh my god, like, well, if you know Charlie Kaufman, you've had to seen Eternal Sunshine. And I'm like, I've never seen it. And then like in high school, it was definitely one of those movies because it came out in 2004. I was in high school like in 2010s, early 2010s. So it was one of those like, man, everyone's seen that movie. And like, that's like the high school, whatever. It's like the Garden State kind of deal. Like it's that artsy, but they're in love kind of movie. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe I'll watch it someday. It's one of those movies. No, I'm so glad. Well, I'm not glad. I don't know. Maybe I should have watched it back then. Maybe I'd have fonder memories of it. But now I'm like, me and Liz watched it last night. She's like, I saw it when I was like in middle school and I really liked it. I thought it was interesting. And then she's like, no, this is awful. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with the characters, and maybe if that's what they're going for, it's fine. I'm sorry, like I'm ranting about this, and I swear I'll give it back to you, Avita. But one main focus that I realize now that I don't like about Charlie Kaufman's writing is that I don't like the way he writes women. Like it really, really bothers me. In Synecdoche, I can kind of give it a pass because it's a very selfish viewpoint, and that there's a whole layer to that. But I think in a lot of his other movies, everything else, it's just very like, especially this one, it's very not great, and we can go about it later. But sorry, yeah. Any other moments for people? If I'm going to choose a moment, I liked the house scene. The house scene was really interesting, and I liked, yeah, the detective aspect where you're given the ending at the beginning, and then you kind of figure out what the rest of the story is as you go along. Um, yeah, but
Cool. Yeah,
yeah, and any big
I'll be
moments?
jumping
Oh,
on
go
that
ahead,
too.
Jeremy.
I'm also a
Go.
huge Charlie Kaufman fan. Like, yeah, he's one of the few writers where when I a film comes out and you see the written by, and you're like, oh, I have to see it because he wrote it. Like, and even though I'm not a huge fan of this, I still have to say, like, his just the sheer imagination of Charlie Kaufman is like, it leaves me in awe. Like, I'm genuinely in awe. Like, every single film he's ever written, I'm just like, how his fucking mind is absolutely insane to me. Like, he's truly like a one of one. I
Where he
also
does
think
a
it's
lot of drugs.
yeah, it's funny
He
because I
talks
don't know
about
if you guys
pot
are
in every
familiar
one of
with
his
him.
damn
He
movies.
is like
Sorry.
the dorkiest guy on planet Earth. He's like the nerdiest of nerds. He's so boring and like geeky. Um, okay, I was gonna bring this up later, but I'll bring it up. A lot of people don't know this. He got his start as a sketch comedy writer. And he wrote sketches for the Dana Carvey show. So he was in the writing room, and he talks about this a lot with like Louis C.K. and Dana Carvey and Dino Statomopoulos and the writing room, and Steve Colbert and Steve Carell. And he wrote a bunch of really bizarre sketches, like where Bill Clinton has 6 nipples and is breastfeeding dogs and stuff like that, like just really bizarre sketches, and it's a really interesting moment. If any of you all get a chance to see it, where Stephen Colbert, before he hosted his new, the late night show, he still had the Colbert Report, where he played that right wing conservative persona, and Charlie Kaufman was his guest. So it was a really interesting thing because they were old buddies from like 20 years earlier working on this failed sketch comedy show. But Colbert was still in his, you know, Republican conservative persona. So he's interviewing him, and I thought it was really funny that Stephen Colbert looks at him and he says, he goes, "Your films, they stress people out, man. You think too much. Your films are too much. They're too much thinky brain about thinky brain people." And he goes, and I just think I don't know how anyone enjoys any of your movies, because I want to go to the movies to have fun, and no point in any of your movies is anybody having fun, including the audience, you know? And Charlie Kaufman just kind of deadpans it because that's who he is. He's like the least charismatic person ever, which is funny. And he goes, "Oh, I don't know. I just kind of like try to get all these thoughts in my head out, and hope maybe some people in the audience identify with my own insecurities." And all I remember is Stephen Colbert goes, "See, that's your problem, man." Is he goes, "You think too much with your brain when really you want to think more with your face, because that's what people are impressed by. Unfortunately, you have an ugly face, so that's why you're stuck with your brain." And it's just this really funny exchange where the two of them are like laughing. But I do want to say that again, I am a massive fan of adaptation. Every time there's a list of like the best screenplays of the past 25 years, number one and number two are almost always Adaptation and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in some order. Like they just rotate like one or two depending on the poll. But the weird thing is, I shouldn't say I'm not a fan of Eternal Sunshine. I just think it's not one of his better scripts. I think Adaptation is stronger, and I actually think it's similar to what Cassius is talking about. I just have a hard time digging Clementine, and I'm not actually rooting for them. And I think for me personally, he keeps talking. Joel keeps pining about the relationship. For me, like so the moment that stuck out to me at the end is actually the very ending scene. Going back to satisfying endings, we get the idea. I mean, it's well written in the idea that Joel loves her, and that they were part of this amazing relationship, yet all the evidence from the film shows us otherwise. So it makes me think Joel's kind of an idiot. And I'm not, and so at the end when they're confronted with their memories, I remember the first time seeing it, I was like, oh man, the truth hits hard, you know? And now that like the idea of them being actually confronted with the truth of their relationship and without the rose-colored glasses of memory actually fogging it up, you know? And then they decide to try again, and I was like, "What? That doesn't," you know? And then I remember thinking, "Boy, they're both stupid." Because like I don't know. That's my response to the film. Is I thought it was actually. I remember watching it and thinking this is a really cool examination of relationship dynamics because I think everyone at some point has experienced like perhaps the end of a relationship, maybe not even a romantic one, but a friendship or something, where we look back and we're like, oh man, that was da 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 da. That was some good times. And it's because we tend to only think of I think this is at least in my case, when we tend to recollect particularly people or relationships, we tend to remember the positive ones, you know, the positive moments, I should say. And then it's almost like we forget why the thing fell apart in the first place or, you know, why it crumbled in the first place. So I thought this was a really, really interesting dynamic that explores that concept of like how much of reality and our own distrustful memory, you know, what happens when they meet. And so when they decide to give it a second effort, I'm not crazy about it because it's presented. It feels to me like it's presented as a hopeful thing that maybe the second time around they'll get it right, or it's a redemption arc, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier, where maybe if it was presented more as like The Graduate or something like, where it's like, oh look, the film was about how people make the same stupid mistake twice or something. You know, I don't know. There's just something about the last moment that struck wrong, and for me what it does is it makes the rest of the film kind of, it doesn't resonate for the rest of the film for me personally. I think if you tweak
Yeah.
that last minute, that last ending, you know, then
hmm
maybe. But
I,
but I
I
will I will say this one thing, one last thing. I also think part of that is this is the height of Michel Gondry at his powers, and
mm,
I think he was like a super imaginative filmmaker, and his music videos were awesome. And I used to have the DVD of Michel Gondry music videos, and all, he was. There was this period where just like I think he was just visually incredible, like visually one of the great artists of maybe the last 30 years. But I kind of realized he's not necessarily a great storyteller, per se. Like it's weird because I think of him and Spike Jonze as almost the same category as these music video directors who transitioned into film, and both of them made Charlie Kaufman movies. Right, being John Malkovich and Adaptation, and then Eternal Sunshine. But I think Spike Jonze is has just a better like grasp of like things like character dynamics, and I mean he's visually cool, right? But I don't know. I think Michel Gondry, maybe just his personality. Again, if you see enough interviews with him, I think he tried. I think that's one thing that happened was you have a director who is really trying to squeeze something hopeful out of a Charlie Kaufman script, and Charlie Kaufman is not someone who is a hopeful and optimistic human being. And I think as a
hmm
result of that, we end up where he's directing his own films now. And anyone who's seen Synecdoche or Anomalisa, yeah, this is not a man who functions where like joy is always around the corner, And I think that might be an interesting component where if you try to separate the writing and the director, and this might be an interesting clash where there's a director who can visually match Charlie Kaufman's insane imagination, but didn't have the same
weary
worldview.
world
Yeah, and we
weariness. Yeah.
have when we have this kind of film that ends up being kind of, I'm not sure. I don't know. That's my theory on it, at least. So
hmm
sorry, hijack the whole thing, but yeah.
you're excited about the movie. I totally get that. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I I saw the movie a long time ago when it first came out, and I guess because I was anticipating, I had a certain idea that was going to be a love story, that it might be a little bit funny because of the characters. I loved Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
So of course, when I saw the movie, I hated it, and I was like, "Oh my god!" So then I saw it again, several years later, in bits and pieces and stuff like that. And so I've never loved the movie, but it's always been very intriguing. Very, it's something that you can't forget. I guess is the way I want to put it. And
you can't forget Eternal Sunshine. That's funny.
And like things will come up, and then I can make comparisons to that film because of seeing something from somebody else's point of view. So it's in that way, I would say it's a good film because you can't forget it. You can't stop talking about it in a way, but it wasn't satisfying in the sense that what I was anticipating.
I absolutely get that. Like, I sometimes think about, like, I think Charlie Kaufman's the only one that understands Charlie Kaufman plot lines. There's so much going on that, like, it does leave you confused, and I think that's part of what he's trying to do. I want to try to keep focus on most of the writing aspect because, like, this movie's crazy everywhere, like in timelines and everything. You don't even know exactly where stuff fits, like what time this certain thing takes place in. And yeah, like I think I don't know. I think that's also like, I think for me now, watching it now is very like, it felt very pretentious, almost like very like, okay, we're doing this now. But then I realized, like, oh, at the time it came out, that was like the height of, like Elvita, like you said, like Memento, Pulp Fiction had just come out a couple years before Memento, so it was like, okay, we're doing non-linear
Fight Club,
storytelling.
in terms
Fight
of
Club, yeah,
films that don't age well, but everyone thought were cool when they first came out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Boondock Saints, but I'm still watching it every
Fucking kill you over your Boondock Saints.
St. Patrick's Day. Every St. Patrick's Day. Love it. Anywho. No, but like, it's those movies that just have this non-linear storytelling and kind of make you I have a whole thing about being a detective when you're watching a movie. Like, there's a whole theory about that, and I'll get into it if you guys want to. But like, it does make you a little bit more of an observant viewer. It makes you try to notice things and try to like the movie calls for you to really pay attention to itself. If that makes sense. Like, and I think that's one thing that the writing does a lot. I think
it feels like you become more of a participant, and it doesn't make you feel like you're stupid, but it makes you feel like you're intelligent because you're piecing it together. So it unlike most films, it because it doesn't follow a recipe as such, it makes me as an audience member feel like I'm actually, like, my intelligence is being engaged.
Yeah, it's like a little pat on the back for like, hey, you stuck through it, and you're like, yeah, I did. No, I guess to talk about it real quick, the detective theory is just like, I think about audience viewership a lot. I think about how audiences interpret certain things, and whether you guys like them or not, I think Lynch, David Lynch, has a lot of interesting theories on things. And I think one thing he did really well with Twin Peaks is that he made one of the main characters one of the most likable people, someone that you're going to follow through the entire time, a detective, because it's what an audience member does. It's what someone watching a movie does. They watch a movie and they're given the clues and they watch through the whole thing and try to come up with the story as it goes along. Like, whether it be any kind of movie, but like, that's sort of what the audience member is doing, and they're playing detective. And I think a movie like this, like you said, Elvira, just I know a dumb way to say this, but yeah, it engages your intellect a bit more. Like, it engages you to be like, okay, this isn't a normal movie that I've seen you know, this isn't a Western movie. Uh, this isn't like anything else. It's a movie that's going to jump all over the place. So I have to remember what happened here and what happened there. Like it's not movie's not going to tell me. So I've got to figure along with it. And I think that's important. Like as you're writing, is just to be able to like explain those clues, like show the clues that you want to show off, and then also like leave the bread trail, but leave it clear enough that that way your audience can actually follow along and that you're not getting caught into your own self. Because I almost think if almost anyone else tried to write a Charlie Kaufman film like this, I think you absolutely like just lose. Like at some point on the page, you just sort of lose where everything is happening. I think Nolan's kind of doing that sometimes with like, I think Nolan's maybe the, like not saying he's trying to copy him, but I just think he's like one of those writers who's just like almost trying to confuse the audience. I don't know.
But do you think this kind of script would ever, like nowadays, get through to anyone or like into production if this guy wasn't already in Hollywood and already like had the connections?
That's a great question.
Because I'm thinking this
think
is
so.
too much out there for anybody to like greenlight production of such a film, because it's all about the numbers and it's all about sellability and it's all about dumbing shit down.
I get that. Sorry, Jeremy, I saw you were gonna say something.
I honestly don't think it would nowadays. You know, it's so hard to get anything through that's not like, you know, a McDonald's sandwich of a movie. Like even if it's not, you know, based on something or an IP, it's something that's it's so watered down. Like I even look at movies from like the early 2000s. I'm like, these were better than the stuff we have now. Like that crap that was coming out, and like 90s stuff was better than that. So it's like it's such a delusion that I don't think we could get a movie like that. Like,
I think
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think both of you are right. I think what it is that where we're at right now is that there's a lot of competition going on right now. There's a lot of like streaming services, and essentially what streaming services are trying to do are just create content farms, and especially with like YouTube and like essentially what Netflix and some of those, especially Netflix, what Netflix is trying to do is just gain all the content so that way they can. Because I've learned recently that every streaming service is operating at a loss. That way, like once they get the bigger content and everyone like starts watching the bigger movies, then once like they have the market share of all the viewing audience, then they can raise up the prices to what they should be because now they own it. It really is monopolizing everything, and it's not the best. You know, it's awful as a consumer.
Amazon, what Amazon did.
Mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I think it's just, and I think you're right where it's just like it's the threshold or the gate to get in has been lessened quite a bit. Like there's a lot more opportunities for a lot of people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have it. There's a lot more. I feel like there's maybe a lot more grant opportunities and a lot more like bigger workshops done by like I don't know, like the Firelight people are the ones that I think of. The HBO, all that kind of stuff. There are places where you can actually go and submit without having to know somebody. Um, but at that same time, I do think like everything is so spread out, like so widely spread out that it's hard to actually find like the one good thing. And I think for a lot of people is that if it's not, I think now one big problem I think of with like the internet is that now it's like no movie can be middle of the road. It can only be really good. Like, hey, you should go check this out. It's really good. Or don't watch this at all. It's awful. Or even a third option, hey, this is really bad. You should go hate watch this, which isn't going to help anybody, which that's a big thing. Um, but I think that's a really good question to bring up because it's like I don't think we're I don't think any of us are really I don't know. Maybe some of us have an idea to go as big as Charlie Kaufman, like as far as like storytelling wise, but um I think definitely is like it's something to look out for is like where is my place in this situation of how I'm going to submit my work, how am I going to get this to audiences and all that stuff. Um
I really like why I brought it up is because I really like the playfulness of it. and I really like the visuals and just the motifs that are in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just thinking, even though you have these famous names in it, like, and maybe these people would be interested in making films like this, just the stars themselves, just to actually get it to production, I'm not sure that would happen.
Mhm. I think you're right. I mean, I'm sure Jim Carrey was all about this movie. And I'm sure even now, if like he was given a chance, like there's actors. I feel like if you give Austin, you know better than I would, but if you give an actor a good script, they would definitely want to go and do this sort of thing. Um, that's where I'm at. I think it's the creators want to do some of this bigger stuff, but I think it's definitely the money situation coming in and like, yeah, getting it into production because everything costs so much just to get it done. Like, it's a business plan, it's a business venture. It's incredibly difficult to get something like that. I keep thinking about making a short, and I'm like, how much will I get? How much money do I want to like save up for? And it's like, let's go big, let's go 5,000. And I'm like, and then I start thinking about anything like, okay, camera. I'm like, well, we got to pay like the person and then rent the camera, and then I'm like, okay, so that's like about a grand and a half if I'm shooting for like 2 days, maybe. And it's like, all right, the actors like, oh, there's like 5 people in this. I'm like, oh God. And I just start like that 5,000 immediately goes away. And I'm like, okay, it's going to cost a lot more money than this. And I need to really plan this out. I don't want to come out to make it sound like, oh man, filmmaking's hard today. It's a tough racket. Like, um,
Tough
but
racket.
like, yeah, but, no, like I think movies like this do end up. I don't know. I think the system that's out right now is just something we have to. It's like the big beast we have to fight, and it's just something to be wary of as we go forward. Because I think you're right. I think one thing I really liked about it was definitely the acting. Oh my God, Jim Carrey and wow, how am I forgetting her name too? Clementine, the actress's name.
Kate Winslet, come on,
Kate
she's
Winslet.
so
Thank you.
pretty.
Sorry, she's so like there was one moment I was like, that's the best thing I've ever seen in almost any movie where she's like. I think she's like leaning back a little bit, and then Jim Carrey's like, "Do you want to go do this thing?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then she like pops up a little bit, and I've never seen that. And I was like, "That's the cutest little reaction in the world." Like that was so playful. That was so fun. You can tell like there's an energy to it. This is like a little movement, just a little like pop up, and I was so excited to see this. And I was like, "All right, cool. Like these actors are really bringing it in."
Even though, like, as a couple, I don't know if they ever did any kind of like chemistry
Training.
testing, before the
Yeah.
film. I was like, what is this pairing? Like, how would this ever happen in real life?
One thing, I guess, to kind of bring it back to the writing, because I just want to, before we get too far, I have a whole thing about. I want to talk about Clementine as a character because I think she can really, really work. I just don't think it was the right era for that character. But
The manic pixie dream girl.
yes, and that's. I think I don't know. I don't think we can go off without it. I don't think we can continue on without addressing that.
Addressing it?
Like, yeah, like it was big. It was huge. It became like an aesthetic for a lot of people. It became uh, um, a derogatory term for a lot of other people. Like it became a thing, right? And like I think this movie was helpful in making that.
I'm gonna pause real quick,
Yeah.
just for the benefit of Gloria and maybe Jackie. Are you guys familiar with the term manic pixie dream girl?
It's like she's
Oh.
like she acts like she's in like a fantasy or something like that. Like it's a specific characteristic, right?
Gloria.
So,
sorry,
Mhm.
are you familiar with the term?
Oh, no, can you say it again, Maxie? What?
Yeah, can someone type it in the chat? I'll explain it real quick.
Go ahead.
It's called the manic pixie dream girl. I can't remember the exact journalist who came up with the term, but the term the term was coined describing Kirsten Dunst, who oddly enough is in this film, describing Kirsten Dunst's character in the Cameron Crowe movie Elizabethtown. And what it was the journalist pointed out that there had been a recent sequence of films spearheaded by Garden State, in which he claimed there was a female trope that he described as the manic pixie dream girl. And the trope is essentially it is a quirky and eccentric female who seems to only exist for the betterment of the male protagonist of the film. Like, so she like wears goofy hats and skateboards and you know, and she's weird and
Does
strange
art
and eccentric,
projects.
but
Yeah.
she meets this depressed man, and then somehow through her manic pixie dream girl awesomeness, you know, like he becomes the best version of himself. But she has no real, yeah, she has no real life goal, or you know, she's just quirky and weird, and that's why Garden State is always like the perfect example of that, where they just like have Natalie Portman wear strange outfits and dress oddly and say shit like, "Listen to this music; it will change your life." And then she
Like,
plays
it's
him
the
the
best music
Shins, like
ever.
it's some
Yeah, the
mind blowing
Shins.
music, you know. So
Sorry.
like, oh, the Shins,
Yeah.
crazy. Blah blah blah. So yeah, so that's what Cassius is referencing when he's, and you'll even see the acronym from time to time. It's become so commonplace in discussions and film reviews that you'll sometimes just see the acronym MPDG, and that's all it means. It's like, oh, we have a classic MPDG here, and it's like da da da. So almost like the last 10 to 15 years, there's been this huge aversion of female characters where, like, honestly, like I can tell you this, where like that's one of the red flags for anybody. Like they're like, does it contain a manic pixie dream girl? And you're like, no. And they're like, oh, good, thank God, we're over that phase. But yeah, so there was the manic pixie dream girl, and that's essentially it. She's this like unrealistic, essentially again, the idea is the character has no central drive of her own. She seems to only exist to better the male protagonist. That's an MPDG. Cool. Does that make sense?
Well, I always thought Goldie Hawn. A lot of Goldie Hawn's movies were kind of like that. But her character worked. She was always like the quirky, funny,
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah, fair
You know,
enough. And that might be a case. I will say this too. I don't want to get too far in that direction. Yeah, yeah. Goldie Hawn, I actually, I know exactly a lot of the films you're talking about, like Private Benjamin and stuff like that, you know. But I honestly, in her cases, in a lot of those scripts, she at least had her own agenda, right? Can anyone tell me what the goal of Natalie Portman's character was in Garden State? Did she have a dream of opening a restaurant, or, you know, blah blah blah? I can't think of a single thing about that character. I can't even think of her name. I keep calling her Natalie Portman's character. Um, I can't think of a single thing about her other than she was
But
strangely
in
unique.
this
And
film,
I think,
like Clementine does have agency and she does have her own opinions.
yeah,
and I think that's why I like this character a bit more. But again, like I just have, I think we were talking about the ending earlier, right? I think one thing that would have made me help me a bit is having Clementine walk away instead of Joel, like, or having like have that moment, right?
But she did. That is the whole point. Like she was the one who instigated the whole problem, which is she went and erased her memory. So she actively got rid of him.
Yes, but then the narrative brought them back together.
But not only the narrative, like for me, that's the bit of the narrative that made no sense. Like, why was she at this beach to begin with? Like, what was she doing there on a work day?
Yeah.
Well,
How did this chance meeting happen by chance? Like, because she was obviously not in his head while his memories were getting erased. So how did she happen to be on this beach?
I take it
Serendipity,
as
which is another rom-com starring Kate. Well, what's her name? Whatever, and John Cusack.
Well,
but yeah. Anyways,
there is a logic to it. Like the idea was that what's his name, Patrick.
Joel?
That's why, because they kept making fun. They kept like announcing it. Patrick, Elijah Wood's character, is taking everything that Joel did. Yeah, he's taking everything that Joel did and then would like, and then just repeat the same exact words to her just to kind of get her to love him, get her to love him. And I think what happened is that it was just one of those like, my logic to it is that in one of his memories, one of the deeper memories was just meet me in Montauk, and then um for her it might have been the same thing. Like her memories are now being like she's getting this weird almost deja vu, but like it's messing with everything. Like she's receiving the same message, like the same words that she
Yeah, but
was.
come on, like the same day at the same time at the same train. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
I
you.
mean,
I
no one lives
absolutely,
in New
I get you there.
Jersey. But come
Yeah,
on, now, the odds of them running into each other in New York are minimal. Such a tiny town. So
yeah, it
I
it
did. I
does.
oh sorry.
I was just gonna say it does bother me, but what I wanted to say, like, just to kind of get back into the characters, that like I think she's written well for the most part. Like I think her attitude is fairly like I've met people like that. I know, I've like my best friend is almost married to one of them. Um, but just someone who's a bit more intense and like is willing to start fights and all that kind of stuff and like um but I was interested to see a character like that and see what the arc would be and no not seeing her change as a person, and I don't think she really ever does in this movie, but like I was excited to see this character kind of be more fully formed. So when you say like Kate Winslet wants to see what this character looks like 20 years later, I'm absolutely for it. I want to see what that looks like because that's an interesting there's an interesting there's something interesting in there. But again, I just think Charlie Kaufman's writing always ends up being like, well, she's not so much herself as she is going to be like I wish there's a better way. It's like a sex object for the guys
Patrick.
kind of deal
Yeah,
for Patrick
that's
and
actually
Joel.
that's actually something I wanted to actually address in the writing because it is in the script. And I think it's fascinating, and I think it's an interesting discussion to have here. And I mean, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Charlie Kaufman, and I was actually looking um, for some kind of, I was researching for something, but he doesn't say a lot about his own material, which can be frustrating.
Mhm.
But I also think, whatever. He's one of those it should speak for itself type things. I actually think the film is like the men are wildly problematic
Oh,
from the
absolutely.
get go to
Yeah.
the end. So it's like it's interesting that I'm sorry, and it's not necessarily trying to turn this where you said he doesn't write like female women like from the outset. It's fascinating to me that the very concept that drives Joel, who is our protagonist, right, is that his ex girlfriend had him erased from her memories, right?
Hmm.
Um, she's free to do whatever she wants. Like, they're
Exactly.
broken up. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And and so I get it. He's still emotionally attached to her, and it spirals him out of control. And so he tries to do the same thing in his obsession with her. And so to me, it's always been an interesting. I know, but again, it's been an interesting exploration of like her as an object of the male gaze, even though I don't think she's an MPDG, because you have these two guys who are fighting for essentially the same woman or obsessed with the same female, and Patrick, yeah, and I actually wanted to talk about Patrick and Stan because they're like my favorite dynamic. No, I love Mark Ruffalo, and just watch him do anything, and I think he sells the shit
Yeah.
out of Stan.
He is okay.
Uh,
He is super cute in this movie. I just got to
yeah,
say that. I was like, oh my god, there's a young Mark Ruffalo in this. Oh, he's
yeah.
adorable.
I was
So
also very happy to see that.
yeah,
Workable.
yeah, so I'm a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
and this is right when again he was kind of bursting. He had just done like You Can Count on Me and stuff like that, and so he was on his way up. Anyways, like um, I thought the Patrick and Stan dynamic was super interesting because I think Stan actually represents a decent guy. I think he's like the only decent guy in the film, because Howard's kind of a shit, and Patrick's
And
a
even
shit.
he's not like super decent because he invites the girl over so they can
Yeah.
like
And
jump on
they
the
take the
bed while
beers.
he's supposed to be working.
I
Yeah,
swear they were gonna start like fucking on top of him like at some point. No, I was gonna real quick. I'll let you continue, Austin. But this was one thing that Liz brought up, and I thought it was perfect the way she described this. Is that like this movie is lacking in no, this movie is just incredibly immature. Like there's a lot of immaturity in these characters and everything like that. And I think the closest we can maybe get is Stan or Mark Ruffalo's character,
Right.
because like, yeah, he's like once he has to get sober up and call the boss, then he becomes a bit more of like a responsible.
Yeah,
He's a bit
like,
responsible. He's
he's the only one that has a conscience in the whole film. Like, not nobody else seems to have
Yeah.
a conscience, and maybe Clementine.
maybe
Maybe.
Clementine. Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, like,
And so to me, I again, this is why the ending bothers me so much, because I still watched the film and it feels like it's about something, and then the ending makes it like, oh, this is just a love story. I thought it was about like more than that, like some deeper
Why? Why
examination
did you
of
think
some
that?
shit. And so even on the rewatch, like the basic idea, and again, all these fascinating fucking concepts that Charlie Kaufman can come up with. So the basic idea is that we're watching two different Clementines, right? And so there's the Clementine of reality that Patrick is seducing, essentially kind of whatever, like some complex Charlie Kaufman-esque form of like date raping,
Stalker? Yeah.
right? Where it's like, holy shit, he's reenacting, Joel's memories in order to sleep with her. That's fucking wild. So we get that version of her, like that Clementine, and then we get the version that is running in Jim Carrey's memory. But I think it's also important to remember the basic concept that memories are not honest narrators, right? That they're like, that's just one of the, and it's also an important concept to remember, even as a script writer, is whenever your characters are telling first person events or whatever, it's there's literally a term for it in theater called the unreliable narrator. So the version of Clementine that we see from Joel's perspective, Jim Carrey's perspective, may not be the actual Clementine. So like the fights, because it opens on them with a fight that breaks up that the last fight they had, right? Because he's going in reverse order of his memories. So it's interesting to me that in Joel's mind, she may be crueler and more vicious and meaner than she was in actuality. And then as he's going backwards and remembering their meet cute at the beach in Montauk, she might be cuter and meatier. That's funny. You didn't mean as meat said, but cuter and meatier worthy, whatever, than she was in reality. So I don't know. I've just always found it super, super fascinating, like that the version of Clementine that he's presented and then the one that Patrick interacts with that shows up at the end may not actually be the same person. That his version of her might be different. And so I was looking at the end, I was like trying to justify the end again. It was like, well, maybe this version of Clementine isn't actually the one that we've been seeing throughout the course of the film, because who's to trust Joel's memories? But I don't know. Like the problem I had was the only other version of her we see is the Patrick version, and I'm just not sure, if there was enough to like tie that romance angle together. So what genuinely actually intrigued me again was Howard and Patrick and Joel, and to some extent even Stan. I think Stan's more like silly than vicious or evil, right?
yeah, I think so.
But like Howard is predatory, Patrick is predatory as fuck. But because it's Elijah Wood for some reason, people like think it's like, oh,
It's Frodo.
Yeah, it's
No,
Frodo.
I thought it was super, super scary, and I was actually intrigued that there was a character like this saying all these things like in the beginning of internet that are now kind of mainstream almost.
Yeah, right. And I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think, talking real quick about Patrick, I think one thing that Charlie Kaufman does really well is just that like he has this sci-fi like idea, and then kind of puts it to its logical end. So not only does it just erase memories, so it's not just total recall, but it's how can you use this machine onto other people? Like, what if you don't remember any of your memories, like with the Kirsten Dunst character, like, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's interesting to have a character like Patrick, as absolutely awful as it is.
Oh yeah, he's a fantastic antagonist.
Oh
And
yeah,
he is
I
the
think so.
antagonist of the film. You know what I
I
mean?
But
did.
she
I did.
and
He's
the doctor
secondary.
are the same. They are both the same.
Yep.
I think. Sorry, I don't know if you had more to talk about, but I have something about Kirsten Dunst in that ending, which kind of makes it a very awful ending and make Kirsten Dunst's character kind of a monster. Like
Right.
at the end, basically what it is that like I think again, what was I gonna say? Like again, I don't like that almost every woman in this damn movie has to be like a love interest. So it's like Kirsten Dunst's character is like, okay, cool, she's boyfriends with Stan, whatever, right? I can
And
maybe
sleeping with
accept
the
that.
doctor, yeah.
But she's sleeping with the doctor now. Like, oh great. But and even before she's also the one to like enact it, and it's like, oh, okay, like we're really doing this. Like she's the like um but like and so but she had
They
but
have
she
an
had
affair at Jack Lemon's apartment.
yeah. um sorry, good reference. No, but like they had talked about how she had wanted to get the memory erased because she was like that was the one thing they did is that she was the one that wanted to get the memory erased, but she was really upset that she had found out about it. And so what she does is then take everybody's folders, find them, and then give it back to them.
Right.
And while that narratively works for, let's say, like for Clementine and Joel, like, you know, you can kind of see like, okay, cool, this is what's happening here.
The amount of
It's
trauma she
really,
may be reintroducing to people.
yes, there are people who are like, let's say there was the guy with the bowling trophy, right? So you can assume like maybe he lost a big league and he's trying to forget, you know, maybe it's ruined his life or whatever, like losing that one big game. So he's won all these other stuff, but he doesn't want to remember anything about bowling or whatever, right? And so now, or winning in that regard, and like maybe it's hurt his family. What I'm speculating, right?
Sure.
But like that's always like a narrative. Maybe he's trying to get his life back on track, and now Kirsten Dunst is now reintroduced that trauma. And now he's probably like now it's kind of maybe going to go back. There's a lady who lost her dog. Like in most cases, you can just get a new dog and like grieve and move on. But evidently, it's to the point where she cannot grieve and move on. So the fact that she's reintroducing that, and I'm sure hundreds of others, like
Dude, I
I
went to darker thoughts. I was like, could you imagine if someone was like molested and had that shit removed?
oh, absolutely.
Or like
Absolutely. It is the most vile thing. And I'm like, that's an interesting thing for a character to do. But again, being it under Kirsten Dunst's like reasoning, I don't think I find it that justifiable. It almost feels like it should be like, I'm freeing you. Don't you remember? Like you wanted to remember kind of deal, right? Like things like, I don't know. It feels different than like you're reintroducing a lot of people to trauma. This is like an act of like, oh, horror. Like it's awful. Like there's so much damage she's gonna fucking cause by doing that, and like because of like a love affair, and then because she had also consensually
consensually. You got it. Yeah.
consensually asked to have that memory erased. Like she's now doing this. Like it's so awful. Like that's such an awful thing, and yeah, I don't know that it just makes it it just villainizes that character for me a bit. Whereas like I don't know, as far as like enough speaking roles to where like you can justify the character being there. There's like two women, and you know, one's the love interest that is dealing with all this traumatic like. There's Patrick, you know, retelling all of Joel's stuff, and then, um, you know, her being as manic as she is, um, and that's you know, she's got a bit of a complexity to it, but she never really arcs out. At least I don't think so. And then Kirsten Dunst's character, who like starts out kind of fun loving and interesting, but then turns into like this vindictive like monster. It's I don't know. It's awful. It's just weird. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to harp on this and be all like you know feminist blah blah blah. But like I just think it's you know
I don't think she's a monster. I think she just drives home the whole idea of the film and just kind of the research of what this I guess like I remember from back when I had seen it first, what I came away with after seeing the film was the inevitability of like you don't choose who you love, and you even if your memory is erased, you will fall for the same person again.
yeah.
So I guess she's just the personification of that for me, and then she's like trying really hard to like stop that once and for all, I guess.
I
That's a
do
good
like
point.
that. Yes,
I have a
I just think
question
the
in general.
implication. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I have a question in general because this is something that fascinates me, and particularly as you were talking about the Mary stuff, right? That's the Kirsten Dunst character. Her name is Mary.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Um.
Or I thought no, it's something else because I kept calling her Mary Jane when I was like
No, it
watching. I was
is
like, no, it's Mary
Mary.
Jane.
It
Yeah,
is
it's
Mary.
Mary.
Is it Mary? Oh, get out of here! That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah. So here's something that I was kind of thinking about, and then hearing you address it for sure. I think the film could 100% work if you completely removed the Stan Howard Mary Patrick plotline.
I think so too. I absolutely think so too.
You know what I mean? Like if you completely removed them, I mean, and maybe they had to exist just as like memory erasers, but if you remove that entire subplot and just made a film about a guy whose memory is getting erased and he's battling with his memory and he changes his mind during,
You
and
would
then
basically
they
get Matrix.
right, and then they meet cute
Yeah,
on the
Total
train.
Recall. Mm-hmm.
Like it might be fascinating if you watch the entire film and remove that entire B plot, and then have them re-encounter with each other. Then you got a film that's exactly what Elvira's talking about. This idea that love conquers all, even memory loss, or even even desire to remove or whatever. That they will somehow innately find each other again. And I always thought it was so strange that this B plot exists purely for that moment for them just to receive the letters at the end. And I'm not sure how much it actually adds to their story because they don't
I
actually
feel like it
have anything to
detracts.
do. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They
because
don't.
like they just meet and then the memory, that whole story starts, but basically like them trying at it again from a place of not knowing
Right.
kind of drives home that concept.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah.
I always got from the movie, or one of the things that always stayed with me is how complicated love is and what is love and how does love work. Because sometimes when you see people, like if you compare marriages or of people that you know, and one marriage works because the two people have the same ideas, they complete each other's sentences, blah 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 blah. Then you see somebody else's marriage and they're like complete opposites, and you're like, how do these people
strangers in the same house?
Yeah. And so I think it's kind of in a way an exploration of what is love. And I'm thinking, because I love to see old movies and everything. Well, in the old movies they showed you what love is. The man does this, the wife does this, this is a blah 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 blah. And so I think people try to emulate that, but now it's so different, and men's and women's roles have changed so much that it's like, okay, what do we need from each other? What do we get from each other? And it's something that we can't answer, really. And I think it's something that people are trying to answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does. I think we were talking about it earlier with like I know everyone's gone now, but like Ken was talking about how it's like a reflection almost of the artist. And I think you're right. I think that's what it is, that sometimes it's artists trying to like emulate like what they see as far as like maybe a good relationship, a bad relationship, or just essentially how to work it out. Like I think I don't know, this movie's kind of filled with like toxic relationships. Maybe not so much. Well, maybe Mary and Stan maybe is like the best one, but it's like you also have what's her name, David Cross and
his
But
wife.
even
And like
Stan's in on it, no? Even did Stan not know, or
he didn't know because that was the
that they were like
it was
communicating, and then he assumed but wasn't sure, and
but it was like a one-time thing. It's like if like, and I totally get that because he describes it as that. Maybe he's lying to her. I don't know. That would have been interesting if he was lying. But like he was just saying like, I saw you two talk once and you seem happier, and then you guys stopped. So I just assumed like something or nothing happened, and And so I get that. That's why I'm like, man, Stan's really like the only like we all said, some person with a conscience. He's like relatively more mature. Like he's but no, I get you, Gloria. Like I think if I was younger, and I think if I was like in high school watching this movie, I probably, as awful as it sounds, I probably would have emulated a lot of this because I think it comes off very romantic. And if you don't see it as it is, I think the B plot definitely hurts it a lot. But like, yeah, it's a very, because it's complex. I think a lot of people may see it as like this is what it is, but I just don't think it really works out. I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but like the ending with the idea of them coming back together, I think with the plot of I think for me it just kind of makes them. There's a nicer way to put this, dumber, because now knowing that they have each other's like tapes,
Right.
they're still going to get together. But like, if we've seen that so far, the relationship was relatively toxic. I see them almost like getting their own tapes and then like playing it and see like, see, you thought of this as me, like they did almost as soon as they popped the tape in the first time. Like,
But also the fact that they hear each other's tapes and then she actually tells him, again, I will think you're boring. And again, and then still they give it a shot. Like
Yeah.
she literally narrates why she left him as though she remembers it.
Right.
And then she still chooses to give it another shot because she loves him still.
The guy she just met on the train.
yeah.
You know.
Nicole puts something on here saying like the ending feels like they keep getting the memories erased and keep repeating this moment as if it's them running in the snow. Like, yeah, that's interesting.
That would actually be a wild movie if there's a bunch of friends trying to keep their if they keep erasing, like, we all have friends who are in a relationship and shouldn't be in it, so they break up and then we kidnap them and erase their memories and then they somehow get back together. So then you do
You're
it
like,
a second
no, and you
time
have to
and
do it
like
again.
no matter what, it's just like like the toxic relationship will forever find themselves.
That's great. Yeah, Nicole says they want to keep trying until they get it perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Like, see, that would have been kind of a cool ending,
That would
Like,
have been a cool ending. Yeah, if it turns out they, yeah. I do want to say this because it got brought up earlier. Gloria made me think about it. What love is, da, da, da. I think this is something that happens all the time, and I think it's a little bit unfair because even we've done it to a certain extent. Every time we talk about Charlie Kaufman, we always talk about the insane plots and just the wild premises, right? I think one thing that might be fascinating is how good he actually is at like shit like dialogue.
I'm
Like
gonna be
he's
honest.
so wild
Yeah.
and zany that we sometimes forget like the guy can like write. And Elvita brought it up too right at the very end where she's talking about I'll find you boring again. He can write those like simple moments where characters are just talking. But we tend to like forget that. Like I know it's a different film, but honestly, one of my all-time favorite lines, like I genuinely think of it, almost as like a mantra, is in Adaptation when the brothers are in the swamp and they're and they're afraid they're gonna get killed by Meryl Streep playing Susan Orlean. I love that film, and they're sitting there in the swamp and one brother, and Charlie says to Donald, in high school you were in love with I can't remember her name, Mary Jo Blurnick, the cheerleader, and you would always go and ask her out, and then blah blah blah, and you'd walk away, and her and all her friends would laugh at you. And Charlie goes, "I wish I were like you. You're so brave." Even he goes, "I wish I were like you. You're so brave and ignorant." And and he tells that story. In high school, you would go and ask her out, and walk away. And you didn't know this, but her and all her friends would laugh at you when you walked away. And that's when Donald revealed to his brother, when he says to him, "Is like, I'm not ignorant. I knew she laughed at me. I could hear them." But he goes, "I decided a long time ago that you are what you love and not what loves you back." And then so like I remember hearing that the first time I was like, "Oh God," especially since the two brothers are like in the swamp dying, like, "God, that's the most beautiful thing ever." And like to this day I still think of that moment. Like he can write these really beautiful, precious moments. but we tend to overlook them, I think, because you're like, when does it happen? Oh, this beautiful moment of brotherly love and da da da. It happens while they're being chased by coked up Meryl Streep and Chris
Yeah.
Cooper in an alligator swamp with shotguns, and like
It happens in the third flashback, but not the third flashback where it's like before they met, but like the third flashback like after they met.
right.
It's like yeah. No.
It's
I mean, I will say
so he does have that ability. Again, like he'll write funny lines like, "Hey, I always remember this. I think it's one of the best jokes I've ever seen in a written in a screenplay." Where again, one brother says to the other, like, "Hey, I got a plan to get out of your house," and then Charlie goes, "Is it a job? A job's a plan." And they're like, "That's a great joke."
yeah.
Is it a job?
Um,
A job's a plan.
I I
Stuff
think
like
for me
that. Right.
sometimes I think for me sometimes with his dialogue it can be kind of too realistic and maybe sometimes a bit like comes off like a bit like I'm not a big fan of all of his dialogue. Like anytime he mentions pot, I don't know why it just sort of seems forced to me. Like
Pot.
anytime he mentions pot in every single one of his movies, pot and trans women for some weird reason. Like it's weird. It happens in John Malkovich being John Malkovich, and it happens in Synecdoche. But um, but what I was gonna say is that like sometimes it just like for me it sometimes comes off as too realistic to where it's not like it doesn't work for the movie if that makes sense. Like it kind of feels it always kind of comes off just a little weird for me. Like it's not maybe so much the delivery. I think the actors are doing the best, but it's like I think for some reason it's always the pot scenes. Like it just doesn't ever feel right because the characters never mention it again. Like maybe they'll do it, but like they never.
Right. Right.
It's the terminology. I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to describe for me. But when I hear those scenes, or there's certain scenes where they're talking, and I'm just like, that doesn't feel like
Legitimate.
legitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it might be legitimate in a conversation with your friend, where things are kind of a bit more free and loose. I guess I don't know. It's hard to describe, but there's certain things like that. Um, but I think you're right. I think there are moments that are like really, really good that he has. I think one of my favorites is God, and it's heartbreaking, but it's in Synecdoche when he's talking to the daughter who's dying,
Yeah. That's brutal.
and the entire thing is just like, I don't know why you left, and like, why did you go, and like, why didn't you ever come back? Why didn't you, why were you? And you can, I think I had subtitles. I don't know if it has subtitles. I think it does, but at the same time, you can hear the person in the translator in the ear, and you hear it, and it's like this heartbreaking thing because it's like this terrible irony because you know what actually happened, and the daughter doesn't.
Yeah, I did want to bring up something related to this movie involving dialogue though, real quick, which is we really only see two couples, right? Well, I mean, like there's,
Like
I
technically three, but
guess
yeah,
there's
no,
Patrick and Clementine, I guess, are functioning in their own weird, creepy way too. Which
yeah,
the reason why I want to bring up dialogue is because you actually have a character who's literally going out and repeating Joel's
hmm
bit, which is kind of fascinating. But I don't know. I just find it interesting the way that Joel and Clementine talk in the memories, and then the way Joel and Clementine talk, in real time on the train. And like, I was trying to think if there were any differences, or that's the stuff I was looking on the dialogue. And then of course we see Patrick's interaction with Clementine, and then of course Stan's interaction with Mary. And to me, I was thinking about this, and the whole film is about these interaction of quote people in love, and and memories, and how we perceive things. Like how do they interact differently? So we have like 4 examples of male female companionship interaction, right? Um, and I just wanted to bring that up real quick because I'm just about running out of time, anyways. But did anyone notice or catch anything differently about their interactions? I know they're different characters, so they'll talk differently. But I don't know. Stan and Mary just had a like, maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm projecting some stuff. They had a less grandiose and heavy interaction mechanism, and I thought maybe that was just because of the Joel memories or shit. And I thought that's interesting, just to tie that into what Gloria said about the way, because I genuinely think about this a lot. Um, the way that we perceive love and romance might be like culturally influenced. I genuinely think about that. You know, like it's like, oh, everything I've learned about how to be a good friend or, you know, whatever, be a good friend or coworker or hit on women, or it sounds funny to say the term hit on, Jesus, or interact with women, blah 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 blah. Like I learned probably from some form of pop culture. You know what I mean? Like you may have those discussions with your parents about certain things in life, but like I don't ever remember like my dad sitting me down and going like, "Here's the way you get a woman to get attracted to you, son." It's like there's like blah blah blah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like
You get
I don't know. I'm
influenced
just
by
I
the
thought it was just
like,
interesting.
comments you hear in your family or as you're growing up, like from your
Right.
uncles or from your whatever cousins or friends, like how they approach things or how they comment on like relationships or like
Yeah.
I'm doing now like a project, an educational project, and I'm working with other guys and just like hearing them talk about women every single day that I'm with them and like we're guiding these kids into the forest every day and stuff. But like just sitting with these hiking guides and just hearing them advise the unmarried ones on what kind of a woman they should look for, just the
Right.
quality, whether she can cook or not, stuff like that. You're just kind of like,
Yeah,
fuck
I
it.
absolutely. No, I
I have to interrupt real fast because I'm gonna forget this, and this is amazing. Right now, in the last 30 seconds of the video goes, I hear these guys telling the younger unmarried ones about the type of woman they should marry or something, and instantly, like in my head, I heard that 1960s pop song. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. It goes, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife. So from my personal point of view, get an ugly girl to marry you because she sure can cook. Like I'll just put it like that's the whole song. It's an
That's
old
where
60s.
I live.
I
I
literally
live
heard that song
among
in my
these
head.
people.
I literally heard that song in my head, and then Elvita goes like, "Oh, can she cook?" And I was like, "Holy shit!" There's literally guys out there suggesting the same thing that Jimmy Soul was suggesting back in like the 60s. It's like,
That is like
oh man,
63 years ago. Yeah,
mhm,
exactly.
yeah,
This is where I live. I live 63 years on,
that's
and it's still the same advice. And you know,
getting
like
married.
it's in front of women. I'm not the only female guy there, right? There's like other feminists there, and they still fuck with this.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
I will say I'm talking to my dad now more about relationships and all that kind of stuff since like I've been with Liz for like 9 years and we talk about it. We haven't ever had that conversation because when I was a teenager, he was out in Austin when I was in El Paso. And so now we're having this conversation and I am so glad. I am so glad I did not get that talk from my dad because there's so much like there's quite a bit of toxicity there. He's learning, he's getting better, and it's now coming off more as a joke, like he's joking about being so intense, but like man, sometimes I'm just like, Dad, is this like I want to be like, is this a joke? Like, are we talking about like I feel like I'd be getting different advice if I was single. You know what I mean? I'd feel like you'd be like,
Right.
what you want in a woman is a good God loving like person who I don't know. He always gave me like these weird advices where it's like you always got to open the door for women. And it's like, but you have to like run to the door first, and you have to do all these things, and they sound sweet at first. And he was like, he always tell me like I always made sure like hold my hand and show affection to his like then wife in front of my brothers because he
Right.
was like I never got that growing up, and I'm like realizing like if it doesn't come naturally, like thinking now I'm like if it never came naturally, why try and force it in the first place to like come off as this like ideal whatever. And I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of glad, partly glad I had to like trial and error my way through this, like
Right.
because that
I
that wouldn't have been great.
I want to kind of focus up and wrap it up, and so we can
Oh yeah,
cut the record. Otherwise, poor Jen's gonna be sitting here watching a video of us for the next
yeah.
4 hours or whatever.
I
So
can
let's.
we can finish
I
up
do
with
want to wrap up
questions.
Eternal Sunshine, and I just want to wrap it up with one question, like for each of
Mhm.
us. What things in the film do you think that you can apply to your own work or maybe avoid in your own work?
Well, okay, so I was looking up the synopsis because I didn't see the movie, this week,
Right.
but I had seen it before and parts of
Right.
it, and I was looking up the synopsis, and a couple of them said that both of them had mental issues, and so that's one of the reasons that it was almost impossible for them to have a good relationship or whatever. They were both dealing with their own mental issues. And in a way, this applies in the sense that, and I think we've discussed this before, that how much of ourselves do we actually write in? I mean, is it, I don't think we do it in purpose, but of course our perspective and what we have gone through in life. But I guess my thought or question is that how much of us is in our screenplays,
Yeah.
or how much is revealed through our screenplays. Like, yeah, I forgot the name of the author of this.
Friday Kaufman.
Coffin, huh? So
Yeah.
you were saying that that it reflects a lot about his thoughts, or
Like it may and it may not. I don't know.
I will. Sorry to interrupt. I will say this. This is the least bleak thing he ever wrote. Like, this is the
Yeah.
closest thing he ever
Wow.
wrote to a happy script. Like, even John Malkovich ends with him trapped in Orson Bean's body, staring at his ex-wife and her new lover, repeating "Let me out, let me out" as the film cuts to black. And I was just sitting there in the theater, like, God damn, that sucks. You know what I mean? Like, and like, this is the happiest he has ever gotten, because at least they kind of try in the end. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Synecdoche is fucking.
Oh no,
Jesus
that is a downer.
Christ, that hurts.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you need something nice after that movie. You need like puppy videos or something. Like that is.
But
and his most
later
recent film
was
is called. The title is "I'm Thinking of Ending Things." So
Yeah.
but
which is
also
another
like
great film.
another falling in love story that he did later was Anomalisa, and it's
That one's dark
horrible.
too.
It's
Yeah,
so
that one's all about
depressing.
I think this is where the women writing thing comes really good. Like I think it plays a positive in this case with Anomalisa, because it's all about like almost objectifying women. That's what the character is doing.
Horrible. I hated that film.
It's a dark film. It's a dark film where everyone sounds like Tom Noonan. Yeah. What's it called? No, I agree with you, but I guess going back to Gloria, like I don't know. That's a deep question to ask, but I don't think I don't think you need to put all of yourself in there. I think you just need to put a little bit of yourself in there and just like make every character someone that you can identify with or just understand, even if it's like even if they are bastards, like even if they are like misogynistic or terrible people, you understand why they are. It's hard, especially like in a movie like this. It's hard to tell. Like it's hard to separate the two, but sometimes you can just have really well written characters. But sometimes it's I guess speaking of like what helps and what doesn't, or what I could take and what I could not take. I think I can really. I always admire his imagination and how on both a visual and emotional level, he can like represent the same, like he can represent an emotional level through his visuals. And I think that's so incredibly fascinating and in such a way where it makes sense and not too abstract where you can't understand it. I think that's something I always take away from his stuff. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a big fan of this movie, so there's a lot I could not take with it. So
I can so for me, I guess what I said is this idea of not underestimating the intelligence of the audience and also incorporating this playfulness. I read a good quote recently from the Paris Review, some author, and it said something like, when you write as though you're writing the best letter you can write to the smartest friend you have.
Huh. Yeah.
That's really good, like because of this tendency to when you're trying to write commercial stuff, you're forced to sort of dumb it down for everybody. But I'm thinking like if pieces like this one can get made or have been made, then there's still hope.
As we have our own bleak outlook. Our own bleak outlook is we'll never make movies as bleak as Charlie Kaufman ever again. That's funny. No, yeah, that's good.
I spend the day like watching Melissa McCarthy because I'm imagining her like starring in the Sweetest Taboo thing. And I'm just thinking like, shit, like a lot of the films that she has done from whenever she started her production company have just
Right.
been these like exactly the same characters and then just in different versions. And they literally like most of the films cost around 20 to 40 million and they made between 60 and 100 million. And I'm just thinking it's such simple narrative. It's like the later ones are just even really bad jokes. It's not even funny anymore. And still the films gross over 30 million, right?
Yeah, she's a bankable star at this point. You know what I mean? Like it's just like just throw her name on the top. Even if it's not like Identity Theft wasn't, I didn't think, a spectacular film, but I was like, oh, I'll watch her and Jason Bateman. I'll watch her beat the shit out of Jason Bateman
The
for
Boss.
an hour.
The other film that I watched today about her being like a college mom going to college, like literally not one funny thing in there. Like only Christina Aguilera makes an appearance, and that's it.
Yeah, same thing. Honestly, no, we're just like trashing. Yeah, same thing with like Tammy, where it's just her and Susan Sarandon.
But
like
there's
getting drunk
actual plot in Tammy. There's actual jokes in Tammy. There's like social justice issues in Tammy. There's more layers than just her being this foul mouthed whatever.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, too, I'll come back in a second. Like, I have a copy of the screenplay, and I'll share it with you guys. Talking about Melissa McCarthy, if you guys ever get a chance, watch Can You Ever Forgive Me? I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, she's quite good in it. I thought she was really good. And she was like the fifth option.
Okay.
There were all these other
But that one she didn't write herself.
Right.
And she didn't direct. Like her husband didn't direct, I don't think.
Right. And her co-star won the Best Supporting Actor, which is a good sign. That means he was definitely playing off of something, and that's because she was really good in it. But it's interesting if you watch that film. I think she's fascinating in it, and obviously she's an actor. Blah 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 blah. But there's this assumption that because Bridesmaids is what like threw her star. She was doing that TV show Mike and Molly, whatever, which was kind of a hit. But Bridesmaids like catapulted her.
She started with Gilmore Girls.
Right. And she was doing a lot of TV, and then she plays the raunchy friend in Bridesmaids, and everyone's like, oh, she does that and only that. So it's kind of cool to see her like in movies like Can You Ever Forgive Me? And they're reminded like, oh yeah, that's right. She like busted her ass for 20 years before she got famous. You know what I mean? And she's really quite talented, and she's not just this like one note thing.
But she also to the point where like is because she like the last films that she did, like the Sterling and this Mom College thing, like it feels like because her husband is directing, he doesn't direct her. He just gets her, like leaves her to be a type, and then she just falls back into the type. And
that's interesting. I actually, the TV show they did on Netflix that he created. I don't know if you saw that, where she was the lead in it.
What's it called?
I'll look it up. They did a series for Netflix, and I made it through about 3 episodes, and I was out.
Okay.
She's so talented, but her husband wrote and created a series for Netflix, and she stars in it, and she's good. She is what she is, but it's actually an interesting premise where he's the lead actor in it, and he sees an angel, and no one believes him that he can visually see angels. He gets struck by lightning, and now he can see angels, and no one believes him. That's the premise. But anyways, yeah. So, I just did want to like address that too real quick. Like, yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating. Where I kind of agree with you. She keeps working with her husband, and the stuff they're putting out is not as good. Um, and so maybe it's just time to like, yep, go back to your old collaborative buddies. I actually, interestingly enough, I just want to say this because we were talking about things you can take and not take. It seems almost like counterproductive, but because the one thing I always admire, like I said about Charlie Kaufman, is his wild imagination and these complex tales that he weaves together. But I, honest to God, in this case, think, like I mentioned before, he got in his own way with his B plot. I think if he had just been able to write a simple story, then we might have had a really strong movie, about Joel and Clementine, and he could have conveyed his own bleak worldview without getting into this zany subplot. But then again, if you watch adaptation, then you realize this guy can't seem to write anything simple. Like it's impossible. You know what I mean? Like he can't seem to do it. Um, so the one thing that I would actually take from this is I think what he missed, sitting here criticizing Charlie Kaufman, the greatest screenplay of the last 25 years. I think the one thing that got missed in this is like I fundamentally can't tell you what it's about in one or two words. I don't know what the central dramatic question is. I've really tried to think about it. Like I've really tried to think like if that what's that movie about? And it's like, is it about relate love conquers all? It doesn't feel like it, you know. Is it about like the toxicity of male in modern society? I mean, that's an element, but I don't know if that's what the movie's about. You know what I mean? Like it feels like there's a bunch of swirling shit. Like he just threw it in a
It's an
pot and
exploration. It's an
yeah.
exploration of love. And like for me, as a whatever teenage version of me saw that, it was about inevitability of love. And in a way, it feels like a Romeo and Juliet story.
Oh, I'm gonna put that in a. It's about the inevitability of love. That is, yeah, that's amazing. Maybe actually, now that you said it out loud, that probably is it because of the ending, um, which conveys that they're gonna give it another go. The inevitability of love. Yeah, which is just funny because like, oh, is that bleak or not? It feels it. Oh, it's like anywho, yeah. So I
Romeo
don't
and
know. It's
Juliet was bleak.
true.
This
Well,
is
I
a
mean, it
bit
ended
less
the war
bleak.
between the families. Yeah. I mean,
This,
at least there's no more war in Verona
but this
because
is this is like the individualistic take
Romeo
on
and
Romeo
Juliet.
and Juliet, because here it's
Oh,
like they kind of exist in a vacuum. He's the only person that has friends. She
true.
has no friends. Right? This is kind
Oh,
of
that's
what you
true.
get from this film.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be double funny is if like they meet up. Oh yeah. I'm. We'll wrap it up real quick, but we have to address it since it got brought up. Fucking Romeo and Juliet, man. Like it's like the most famous play. It's just like the most famous story in Western society, and it all hinges on the fact that they're fucking idiots. You're
Exactly.
talking about like
And these
serendipitous, just like
two, no,
you're just
they
like, oh
choose,
my
they
god,
willingly go at it again.
yeah, just don't stab people. Okay, you stabbed them, fine. Then you know what? We'll escape. Just make sure that she gets the plan that you're faking your own death. Oh god damn it, we fucked that up. And so, like the last few minutes where they're like drinking the fake poison and waking up, you're just sitting there like this fucking turned into a goddamn Three Stooges episode. It drives me absolutely bonkers.
But this is
It's like,
the whole thing you always say: give them obstacles, chase them up a tree, throw rocks at them. It's all there.
yeah. Well, I tell you what, the biggest rock and the tallest tree in that is that Romeo and Juliet are fucking stupid. So like they got a lot going against them from the outset. You're like,
They're
Jesus.
young. They're young.
Love. This is
You can
love.
be stupid when you're young because you don't know any better, right? I mean, they're like only 14 and 16,
Yeah,
so
they're fucking teenage morons. That's just like we should just do a modern adaptation
As
and just call it
teenagers are, they're
Teenage
usually
dirtbags.
morons for love.
yeah. For love, the tale of
True love.
star-crossed teenage morons.
that's like
Right.
have you seen the Heartbreak Kid with
Oh
Ben
yeah,
Stiller?
yeah.
And at the
That's
very
the original,
end,
and yeah,
oh yeah, at
yeah,
the very end, he just goes, "Love, love, love."
yeah.
That's my favorite
I,
because, yeah, that's it. Love, love, love.
I'm really glad that we've officially come up with a catchphrase for the group now. So anytime there's like a plot hole or something that doesn't make sense, like I don't know why this character would behave that way, we can just go for love, and then like it instantly becomes
That's
for
that's
love.
true. Love makes you do stupid things. That's for
That's
sure.
funny.
Oh my god. I'm glad I'm like middle-aged now because now this is funny to me. Up until recently this would have devastated me all over again.
Oh, I know.
Triggered me,
Jenny,
maybe.
I know we're all laughing because I know that each of us found the love of our life at 15, 16, 16 and a half, 17, 18, 21, 23, 25. Just like, oh God.
29.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I found the love of my
34.
life. Yeah, it's like 11 or 12 times I found the love of my life.
I was gonna say,
37.
me.
39.
Yeah, and see now the thing is like I'm old enough where I'm really starting to think the love of my life died in childbirth. I'm like, oh,
I
that's
always go, the person I was supposed to marry has been killed in the genocide, so oh well.
oh shit. Fuck. That's
No, but this is like literally here in Boston, it's like whole generations of women have remained unmarried. Like my
That's
generation
funny.
and a bit older, like about 10 years older and than me, that literally that whole generation has been wiped out. Like, all the people that have been killed were mostly men. So I'm just
Right.
like, yeah, this is just casualties of war. What can we do? At least I have a kid. I'm always like, I fulfilled my biological, what's it called? Assignment. My biological assignment. I've completed that. I've replicated my DNA. I'm good.
It's weird. It now got my brain working and all these. So we're sitting there like, oh man, all this mass that. And immediately, all I can think of is like the Iliad, and I'm like, oh, that's another famous story, right? It's not Romeo and Juliet, dumb, but it's dumb. Where it's like, oh, what was that? That's a 10-year war between Troy, and the Greeks, right? Blah 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 blah. 10 years, thousands of dudes died. Why? For love. Like literally, the whole thing was a fight over one woman having an affair. You think at one point all the soldiers and generals would just be like, just find a better woman, just like move on. But nope. I was like,
Well,
yeah,
you know the love story between Abelard and Eloise?
I've
It's a
heard
real
it.
famous, yeah, very famous French love story back in the I don't know, the Renaissance or whatever. And I mean, it's so tragic. And I mean, it was a real story. And they have a shrine, where lovers go and whatever. But their story is so tragic. Eloise and
So I guess the last question, sorry to interrupt, right before we wrap up, because it's getting at 2 and I want to stop recording a bit, is this. In terms of this is genuinely a question now. In terms of all-time epic love films, where does Eternal Sunshine rank? Because it's considered one of the great screenplays of all time. And now that we've established it's about the inevitability of love and for love is like,
Come on, Cass. Come on. No, you have to engage your teenage brain here. I would put it up there with Romeo and Juliet, just from my teenage brain perspective.
Okay, so I'm going to.
I would put it about middle because it's very thought provoking, and it's an example of what we're trying to figure out about love today. But it's not the greatest, not the worst.
That's funny. I was going to ask, because you mentioned you fulfilled your biological assignment and you have a teenage daughter. Have you shown her Eternal Sunshine yet?
We watched it together.
And
What'd she think?
how did she feel? Does her teenage brain
I'm
attach to it?
gonna call her and ask her that question. Just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, Cassius, how did Liz like the movie? Just curious.
She liked it when she first saw it, which was like around the time she was a teenager, because it was like she'd never seen it before. But then, yeah, now we're both like, no, she didn't like it. Yeah.
Elvira. Elvira.
She goes. She's talking here.
Niala here. Oh, dude, yeah, we're gonna get the teenage perspective about love.
That's 12, so she's not an official teen yet. She's 12, but what did you think of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? It was awful.
It was awful?
Yeah, exactly. Odd.
Odd.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's definitely odd.
It's a weird movie.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Well, I don't know. All the characters are very weird.
No, yeah, that's what we've been talking about. They are
What did you think? What did you think the film was trying to say? What was it about?
Well, the two people, the Clementine and the guy, what was his name?
Joe?
Yeah, that one. But they met again, even if their memories were erased.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what were they trying? What was the film trying to say?
That love conquers all.
That's what we've been trying to figure out too.
Yeah, we've been working on it, and so this is what we've been debating. And just to let you know, your mother claims that film is about the inevitability of love, but you have to say it just like that. For love.
For love.
That's why we've been laughing. And then, so just because she's been sharing this anyways, she's also confessed that she saw this film as a teenager, and it just like blew her mind, and now she's watching it older, and it's not quite the same. So we've been a little hard on the movie, but Elvira's been arguing that we have to focus on it as if we were still using our teenage brain, and it just makes me laugh. It's like, it's a movie written for 15-year-olds, to like watch. You're like, wow. Like,
but aren't there some romances or things that wouldn't you like to erase sometimes?
Yeah.
A bad romance.
That's why I liked the concept of the movie. I liked the sci-fi element, but it was
But this is kind of like, I've talked to some of the people that have lived through war here, and this is literally their coping mechanism is just forgetting. Just literally consciously trying to forget and never think about certain things in the war that happened, or ever like whenever they're reminded of it, just like not engaging, just as a coping mechanism to then,
right.
to not,
you know what reminds me of a little bit, because I actually
tell her thank you. Tell her thank you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Niala.
Now left.
Thank you. Yeah, tell her thank you.
Wandered off. She's like, I'm done with these fools.
Yeah.
So like,
no, she went to get her toothbrush.
Oh,
okay.
She's back. She's back. She's just gonna be brushing her teeth and watching our stuff.
But I had to write this whole paper, like a 10-page paper on a television, whatever. And I chose the TV show F is for Family, the animated Netflix series that Bill Burr created. Particularly just because it reminds me a lot of like my family. Like that was like my family. It's insane. My dad was a ginger growing up in New England in the 70s, and I was like, "It's fucking perfect." Anywho, it's just interesting to hear Elvira talk about it, because she's like, people have these memories and they just move on, and they can't erase them, so they just move on past them. that is like the traditional male like thing that's led to all these mental. Like there's a sequence in F is for Family where the son has something traumatic happen to him, and the dad goes, "You know what you do? You just shove it way down, like way down, and you never talk about it, and you never ever let anyone know that your feelings are hurt or that you're in pain or that he broke up with his first girlfriend, and he's like, or that she had any effect on you at all, at all." He's like, you just shove it way down, you never think about it, and then I don't know, 30 years you'll randomly punch something, and then you'll finally be over it. But that's the way we deal with things in this family, son. You know, it's like, and you just see the little kid nod, like, "Got it, Dad."
That's
And so he's like,
family tradition. That's how we were raised, right?
it's like, don't ever think about it. Yeah, this made me laugh real hard. She's like, "Oh shit." Yeah.
Can
So it's just like it's
Can-
interesting because we were talking, and it wasn't brought up, and I'll stop recording right after this last thought. And I didn't really think about it till it was brought up about Mary sending all those memories back out. The amount
Yeah,
of
that's not a
trauma
good
she's
thing.
reintroducing is horrifying. I didn't really think about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that was one thing I thought of. I was like, that's not good. That she's gonna get people to self murder themselves.
Yeah, I thought too when I saw that she had done that, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh my God.
So
yeah,
many
that's
people are about to
interesting.
unalive.
So you know what that does is it brings up another movie, one last movie from the era that I want to bring up, and it addresses this thing. So we're talking about things to avoid, like plot convenient narrative that fundamentally change our perception of a character.
Mhm.
So like now that you pointed that out, it's like, holy shit, Mary is a piece of shit. You know, oh,
Yeah.
God, what a deeply unlikable
But
human
from her
being.
perspective, she's trying to protect people from getting into the same situation as to what happened to her.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Like there is a justification. I
yeah,
was gonna say real quick, Austin, because you asked the question about where it actually falls in the love thing,
right.
and like the love movie. I'm
Pantheon
half
of
joking.
love films.
Yeah, I'm half joking about doing that, but like, I honestly, I actually don't know if I have any movies that I list as good love movies that I'm like, wow, these are these are something to look up to. Like I've never really found a lot of love movies to be very convincing for me, if that makes sense, or romantic. Um, like for me, this one just sort of is like another drop in the pool of like movies that like love movies that just don't really hit the mark of romanticism, because I think that's such a hard thing to actually capture. I don't know, like a lot of rom-coms try to do that, and for me, rom-coms have never really like felt romantic. They just felt like comedies, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. Like I'm also just saying this so I can also ask like if there are movies that anyone would recommend that are like their top, like I've seen The Notebook. That's maybe the closest one, but like there's a lot of like
I love The Notebook.
yeah,
I love Shakespeare in Love.
Shakespeare in Love. Okay,
Even though it's a Weinstein production, I mean, I hate
Yeah.
that.
You
But
gotta let stuff go. Yeah. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well, not let stuff go, but like I
but
you know what I mean. You
yeah,
can't.
yeah. Have the
no,
have
I mean,
the
at the
context.
time when I saw Shakespeare in Love, I was not aware, so
Mhm.
that's why I can like refer
Recommend it.
to it.
Yeah.
That
Well, I'm
the
trying to
script
think.
was good, and even though it like ended tragically, like
Mhm.
the way Romeo and Juliet ended tragically, it was still an actual experience.
One of my favorite is Out of Africa.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's an
And
interesting choice because
it's tragically too good.
that's considered. That's one of those pictures that won Best
Oh,
Picture in the '80s, and now as time has passed, it's not received nearly as well for a variety of reasons.
that's interesting.
But
Yeah.
Robert Redford and Meryl Streep hanging out in the African wilderness,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love
Interesting.
my
What
favorite
brought you
scenes
out
from
of
there.
Africa? I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, I love the where he takes her on the plane and they're going through that swarm of pink flamingos and just the beauty of it. And I guess you know what, the cinematography is just absolutely great. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. But I showed it to my mother the other day, and when it ended, the way that it ended, she goes, "Oh, if I would have known it ended like this, I never would have watched it."
Right?
I'm with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I can't handle heartbreak.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
no worries. So yeah, it's interesting because that might be a fun discussion or thing to look kind of theme towards is romance films. Like I've always liked, again, same way, like it's a Weinstein film. Yeah, it's a Woody Allen movie, but I always loved Annie Hall. Like even though they don't end up
Mm.
together, I just thought that was a really good film. And I think the tragedy of that is actually that they don't end up together and they're actually a really good couple. Because I think there's a lot of rom-coms where like they end up together and I can't figure out why.
Yeah.
And in that case, you're like, oh, they had some moments that were good,
Mhm.
and the ending of that is really solid. I'm gonna go like generic here because I grew up on it. I still think The Princess Bride is one of the best romance fucking stories ever written.
Okay, I can see that.
Whatever. Like I don't care. I'll still watch that movie. That's one where it's like I don't care where I'm at. If it's on, I'm gonna watch it. Quote it and say like every single line.
Mhm.
Another one.
How
It's a good
about
movie.
dancing?
Which one?
Huh?
Dirty Dancing.
Of course.
Nobody puts baby in the corner. Okay.
Yeah. Elvira's at the demographic. When I was a kid, my older cousin, my cousin who's a few years older than me, like that's it. She just watched Dirty Dancing like 3 times a day. It was fucking ridiculous. She
Same,
like
same,
she
same.
had the VHS tape and it immediately finished. She'd get up, like eat a slice of pizza,
Yep.
and then put it back in, and just like that's
And I
it.
was like 9 or 8, and I was watching Dirty
Yes.
Dancing.
Oh.
I think that explains the trajectory of the rest of my life.
But it's funny again, as you get older and you watch Dirty Dancing, I'm like totally Jerry Orbach. I get the dad now. You're like, no one puts baby in the corner. And I'm like, dude, his teenage daughter is hanging out with like a 30-year-old guy who's like knocking up chicks all over the resort. And like, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Yeah,
That
dude, get your ass in the corner, baby. Like, and then like in public, he's like
World
gyrating.
hunger. She's concerned for world hunger. Come on now.
You know what else is funny? I have to admit, when I was younger, again, my cousin would watch it all the time, and she's probably about 11 or 12, and I'm about 4 years younger, so I was about 8 or 9 too. I was Alvita's age, I think, and I had no idea what time period that film took place in, like because the soundtrack would use modern music, including the. I love the fact that the film uses the Patrick Swayze song that he wrote and sang.
Does it?
Yeah, it's that song. She's like the wind. She's all that
Oh,
I
that's
need.
it. Oh wow! I did not know that. That's funny.
So it's like all over the American radio. They're like, up next, the #1 hit, Patrick Swayze. Little She's Like the Wind. So it's like, I was a kid. I was young enough. I was like, when the fuck does this movie take place? I wasn't sure if it was like an '80s movie where they just drove old cars, or like if it actually took place in the '60s.
For me, it was like America. This is America. This is what they do in America. That's it was Dirty Dancing and Annie. That's what I watched. Like Dirty Dancing and Annie. So it was Daddy Warbucks.
That's funny. Daddy Warbucks and what is his name? Everyone remembers her. Whatever. Dirty Dancing and Annie. There's a perfect combination in there, Elvira. Dirty Annie or Dancing Annie or something.
This is my parents getting a divorce, and we were living with my aunt and her family for 5 months. And this is their VHS player and my 2 tapes. This is my life when I was like 8, I guess.
That's funny. I will say this. I know I mentioned Princess Bride, and I know it's not typically thought of as a rom-com, but I do think of it that way.
On the
Raising,
list of rom-coms.
yeah,
I found the list.
I was thinking Raising Arizona is a film I love, and I think technically because they're married early in the movie, I still think because the ending they break up at the end and then they end up back together again or whatever. And even the whole reason they kidnap the child is because he's trying to make his wife happy. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Raising Arizona. I love that movie, and I think it's like one of the cutest couples in cinema history. And the ending, we were talking about the ending and the ambiguous ending where they give the baby back, and then the whole sequence where Nicolas Cage is narrating and he has a dream, where he's watching Nathan in Arizona grow up from afar, and then at the end, people come to visit him. And I love the last line where he goes, "Was it a dream?" Or I don't know, maybe it's just Arizona. And then the film cuts to black or whatever. So you'd never actually know if they end up a family or if they end up with children of their own. But it's a really sweet vision where he hopes and believes it can be true. But I love the fact that like as they're turning the baby back, Holly Hunter is even saying to him, like, we have to admit we're no good for each other. We brings out the worst in each other and all this stuff. And then only once they conquer the evil biker, fucking Coen brothers, once they conquer the evil biker and return the baby to his parents, do they realize that they do belong together, you know? Also, I will say this too. The opening montage of them
Oh,
falling.
the natural born killers.
Oh, Mickey and Mallory. That's fucking amazing. See, they're an all-time romance couple because I remember them right off the bat.
I'm telling you.
Romeo and Juliet.
I'm not sure how much there's comedy in there, but
No. Oh, yeah. We'll say romance film. So, like, okay, here you go. Like, great couple, romantic couples. Like, genuinely, okay. Wesley and Buttercup, right? They're an all-time classic. Okay, since we're starting, Romeo and Juliet, Wesley and Buttercup, Mickey and Mallory. That's amazing. I guess we got to go Bonnie and Clyde if we're going that route too.
Are we
right?
talking the movies or like the real people?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's a biopic and whatever. There was, hold on, one other one. Oh, sorry. I had him for a second, then I totally forgot him. Whatever. Yeah, Mickey. But yeah, the fact that I remembered Mickey and Mallory off the top of my head, that should be the litmus test for all-time great romantic couples. Is if you can't name both members off the top of your head, like people go, "Oh, I love The Notebook. They're an all-time great romance movie." What are the couples' names?
Ryan and Gosling.
Yeah, yes.
oh, I knew this. It's like it was for such a long time one of my favorite romantic films, The Notebook.
Right? See, but if you can
I'll
name them, then it's like, oh,
Scarlet and Rich.
Scarlet. There you go.
Yeah, Scarlet and Rich.
Gloria coming off the top rope with an old racist movie from the 30s about the Confederate South. Yeah. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Perfect. Yeah. But you're right.
It's so funny. I went to the Plaza Theater. It was a beautiful theater that we have here in El Paso, and then it had gone run down. And then so they revived it and said they were showing old movies. And so the audience there was a big audience and it was full. And I was so amazed. This was about 10 years ago. At the end, when Rhett says that, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. All the men clapped. I was like, oh my God. I still can't get over that. Yeah, all the men
high-fiving in the aisles. He's an alpha male. Alpha. Woo!
That was funny.
When that happened, there was just a bunch of like what is it? Whey powder, like the bulking powder just went in the air. Yeah,
that's funny. I'm gonna throw. I forgot for a second. Now I remember. I'm gonna throw this couple out there as an all-time great couple too, because people misperceive the film. Rocky and Adrian. I think they're like
Ooh,
one of
that's
the
pretty good.
sweetest couples in film history. The first Rocky is a romance story, and no one can argue against that. I would fight them. And here's my justification. At
I
the
really
end,
need to rewatch Rocky. I mean, we talk about it every single week. So
that's
now
right.
I'm just like at the point where I really need to rewatch
At the
this.
end of the film, right? They're announcing the winner, right? This is how I argue that it's actually a romance movie, right? At the end of the film, he
It
fights.
is Die Hard.
Yeah, yes, as is Die Hard, right? John McClane and his Holly, John and Holly. There we go. Anywho, because this is how I argue. Uh, because he ends the championship fight and they're announcing the winner, and Rocky doesn't even care who won the fight. Instead, we have like the most famous scene from the movie, and it's one of the most famous scenes of all time, where he's just standing in the ring and he's just yelling out. He's like, "Adrian, you Adrian!" And you're like, "Oh!" Then she's running to the ring. She's like, "Rocky, Rocky!" And you're like, and they're like tears in your eyes. You're like, "Oh!" And then they hug, and then the film ends with them kissing each other. You're like, instead of like holding the belt up, and that's when I was like, "Oh shit, this is a romance movie." It's totally about the two of them falling in love, and then him getting punched in the face for a while, but then afterwards, you know, this like that's why the film started to suck when she left the franchise. You know, like the actress was like, I'm done. I'm leaving the franchise. And they killed off her character. And I remember I went to go see Rocky Balboa and they cut to her grave and I got fucking sad. I was like a grown
Oh,
man. I was like 25 years old and they cut to her and then Rocky's there at her gravesite. He's like, I miss you, Adrian. You know? And I'm just like, I was like, oh, she's dead. She's dead. And then like fucking Sylvester Stallone's trying to sell it. He's like, the cancer took you out. And I was like, oh god, they killed her in the worst way possible. And just like bawling, man. And now it's like ever since then, you're just like, oh, poor Rocky living his sad bachelor
yeah.
life with his head trauma. And he doesn't even have his wife anymore, and he's just babbling. It fucking sucks. Anyway.
Yeah, you can hear the head trauma in his voice. It's awful. It's just awful.
I'm pretty sure that Sylvester Stallone doing his own stunts for 30 years is partially responsible for that. Like, his mouth just moves sideways now. He's like, I was trying to watch Tulsa King. Awful. He can barely talk. Anywho, I'm going to stop the recording real quick just because Jen's probably like, what is happening here? Okay, cool. Do-do-do.